Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 465. We begin our two-part look at Wonder Woman. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, Dr. Norge. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Jim. I've always wanted to be an Amazon. So says the sensei of Whatnot Segulin, Duke of You Know, and elder statesman of the podcast.
How's it going, eh?
On this episode, Jim, we're going to talk about Wonder Woman. It's actually really timely. We're going to be talking about issues 0, 90 to 95. And this is the first of a two-part look at this whole run straight on through issue 100. It's a pretty epic storyline and one that's really important, one we've always wanted to do on the podcast. It's timely because of the fact that Wonder Woman's played such a prominent role in the most recent movie. So it's nice to just kind of delve into the character, what we like about her, what we like about this arc. So this one we're going to be really doing some heavy talk about what's cool about Wonder Woman. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Jim, you know it. They know it. We are sponsored this episode once again by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. What is going on at DCBService.com that our listeners should know about?
Come on, bundles, bundles, bundles. We have a wonderful ongoing Rebirth bundle where they're giving you 60% off, only $22.61 for all the Rebirth issues and as well as the issue ones. We also have a really cool bundle with the variant covers, 45% off, $31.16. So if you're a variant cover collector, right there's a great bundle. But wait, there's more. They're continuing the Vertigo bundles. We've got the 10 Vertigo issues that are out there, 50% off, only $19.90. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, there are a number of great books over at InStockTrades.com that you can pick up. I almost said DCBService.com. At InStockTrades.com, you can pick up. Remember, these are sister companies. The one, I'm thinking about Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman Earth 1 hardcover, volume 1. This is 45% off, only $12.64. If you missed this one, Jim, have you had a chance to read this yet?
Volume 1? Yeah.
Yeah. What a great story. It's another great Wonder Woman opportunity. You should definitely check these out. I'm a huge fan of the Earth 1 line. Every one of these hardcovers have just knocked it out of the park. So definitely pick this one up. They have the Invasion trade paperback. It's a classic crossover story. This one's 45% off, only $10.99. Superman, the Men of Tomorrow trade paperback, 40% off, only $9.34. I shout this site out, and one of the things I really love about it is, as we talk about classic storylines, you need the opportunity financially to be able to afford to pick these things up. And the discounts that are offered over at InStockTrades.com offer you the opportunity to grab sometimes, if an arc has like 2 or 3 trades, to pick them up at really an amazing discount price. So I want you to consider shopping over at InStockTrades.com and supporting a website that supports our podcast and so many others. I want to thank both DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the Wonder Woman The Contest. So if you haven't read these issues, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some Wonder Woman.
There they are, all alone except for that old character.
Our first review this episode is going to be Wonder Woman number 90. This is from September 1994. William Messner Loebs is the writer. Mike Deodato was welcomed as the new regular artist. John Costanza letters. Patricia Mulvihill on colors. Jason Hernandez Rosenblatt is the assistant editor. Paul Kupperberg is the editor. Wonder Woman, of course, created by William Moulton Marston. I am so excited that we finally have the opportunity to talk about this story, because one of the things that's always fun when you get to talk about a classic story is not only its significance as a historian, a collected piece, but also how does it hold up today, and what does this story feel like for you? It's been a long time for me in reading this. This is something that you and I talked about doing way back when we were looking for different ideas of classic stories to do on the show. And this was on my short list of ones that we should really tackle, just because I remember when this came out, this was during that era of the anti-hero, the era of, characters like the Punisher was popular, Lobo and people like that were popular. And the question became, for your heroes that were tended to be more of your Lily White heroes, what is their relevance? DC really embraced and tackled that by promoting stories that did comparisons of characters that were both ends of the spectrum. This was really unique because it was a story arc that, while it was focused on the replacement of Diana, quote unquote, she was in every single issue, which was really a neat way to handle this one because you really got to see the contrasting of two characters. The other thing, too, is I remember significantly when I was reading this one going, I really like Artemis. So I really liked both lead characters for very different reasons, but I loved the story they were telling here. So revisiting this one, not only did it evoke for me a lot of great memories in reading it the first time through, but I also found there was a lot of it that I forgot. And for me, this story held up really well. Like, this is a very contemporary feel to the story. But that's me. And I also have the baggage of the fact that I did read it in the past. You are new to this one. So what has this experience been like for you reading this story? Is it something that holds up for you? Is it a story you even enjoyed? What were your thoughts on this one?
It's funny, when back in the day when we were first talking about this stuff, I was able to track down a trade of this, and it took me a while to find because it's not in print anymore and it's hard to find. And I was trying to remember, did I read it or not, or it was just knowledge from other people telling me and what happened. And to be honest, I did not read it. I must not have read it before because the swerves, the oh my god moments, like, what? Oh, I didn't see that one coming. They completely caught me off guard. So I never read this before. So going into this, I really was completely open and just unknown. And I gotta tell you, I really like this story. Not only has it held up for me, story wise, visually, I'm really digging this. Normally when I go back and I look at the older issues, I see the difference in the art style back then as compared to the art style we got now. And the stuff was printed on different paper. The stuff was, digitally, it's digitally colored, digitally saved, and there's a lot more advancements that we have the modern day comics that give it a different look to it. And normally I'm like, oh, well, I really like the modern look over the past look. This one, I gotta say that this art team was really good. And I visually enjoyed it. I thought this was a cool story. I thought you could still have taken this story, and really put it in modern times. This could have been a modern story being told. They'd have to tweak some stuff just because of where she is and who she is in the current universe. But this is a story that's that solid. It can stand up. And to be honest, I've looked at, because I got the contest this time all digitally because it's easier for us when we do the show. And I've been looking at other issues of Wonder Woman from this period because I'm like, I want to see what happens after the contest. Hey, what happened before? What's this? How did she level a city? I gotta read that story. So I've been going through picking up more of this Wonder Woman run digitally now. So now I've got a stockpile of some digital stuff to read.
Now the contest, this goes through the story Fall of an Amazon. And it goes from issues 90 to 100. It also includes the 0 issue, which takes place actually right after 90. For those of you listening to this, if you've never read this story, it is fully available on Comixology. And we're going to be talking about this over 2 parts. So you're able to, if you haven't read this one, go ahead and pause this and grab those issues and read it to join us. Obviously, your local comic shops will have it in back issue bins as well. As Jim mentioned, there are trades of this. They are really hard to find. So, that's another thing to seek out at your comic shops or at conventions. We're going to be going very spoilery on this one because I really want to talk about this one. Of significance, though, this also marks the end of the run for William Messner Loebs. And I'm probably going to start referring to him as William Loebs just because I think I'm butchering the middle name. I may be butchering the last name too. This run was one that I liked it so much because of this story arc that I did a lot of what you mentioned. This was my jumping on point for Wonder Woman. When I read the George Perez run, I read a variety of runs in between, but Wonder Woman was always one of those books, not because of quality. I ended up jumping on and off because of budget. And this contest storyline was one that brought me back in, and I loved it so much that I started back issue seeking for this, much like you're talking about, because I wanted to read the whole story. I wanted to see everything this writer was doing. After issue 100, John Byrne takes over the series. So the series, This marks the conclusion of one run and the beginning of a brand new writer, artist, and a new run. So it's a very significant arc in the fact that it really did mark the end of a certain era and the beginning of a new era. This story, Let's jump right in. I mean, the beginning of the issue, we see Diana returning home after she hadn't able to be there for a while. The island was blocked off to her, so this marked a return. When she returns home, she's obviously met with an arrow, somebody trying to shoot her down on the island. And there's this time passage that for her was months, for them was a decade. And that part of the storyline, as we jumped into this one, was pretty big for me because, like you, I hadn't read what came before. So I didn't know why she was locked out of the island. I actually liked that part because I felt like the mystery that was unfolding, I was experiencing it with Diana. Because as a reader, I didn't know what predated this. So I felt like a lot more, which was good for me because, you know, as we've referenced many times on the show, Wonder Woman is one of those characters I've always enjoyed. I've had runs where I've really dug it with her, but she was not one of those, like, I'm a Batman guy. I grew up reading Batman. I grew up reading Spider-Man. I was not a Wonder Woman guy, other than I liked the Linda Carter show a lot as a kid, but I didn't read a ton of Wonder Woman comics. I more saw her in teen books. So this was one of those stories, kind of like what Perez's run did for me, where I'm like, oh, you know what? I really like the premise behind the Wonder Woman stories. And man, is she a cool character. This got that for me right away. And I do think there's a point to giving readers a chance to go along the ride of the mystery with the main character. Worked real well in this storyline for me.
Yeah, and this was a cool opening, just, you know, kind of that peaceful, empty, silent. But it's funny because how, yeah, you'd think a peaceful beach, that'd be a good thing. But for Diana, she's like, wait a minute. There's something wrong. There should be swimmers this time of day. And, you know, and she's noticing the little stuff that's going on. And of course, the arrow come flying at her. And I loved how they showed the archer, the archer firing on, especially because something I noticed, and it was something I kept noticing throughout the issue, the person shooting the arrow has a left-handed draw. Now, left-handed draw means, you know, your right hand's holding the bow and your left hand's pulling it back. Tradition, you know, if you're right-handed, it's your left hand holding the bow and your right hand pulls it back. So and I noticed that right off the bat. You know, it's like, because you can very clearly see it. And later on, you'll see other people who have a left-handed draw. And I was very happy that, you know, they kept this character having this left-handed draw. Because for me, that was like good attention to detail there. It was one of those things where I don't know if it's actually in the script or how that all came about, but that was something that I caught. And I thought that was a really cool, you know, just a really cool notion.
The thing I really liked is emotion in the beginning of this, too. You're referencing that great sequence, and you're right about that attention detail. I really liked that as well. I liked when we first see her on the beach, there's like this sense of calm. Like, this is a beautiful paradise place, you know. I mean, Themyscira, you know, on TV shows, Paradise Island, you know, those type of things. You get that kind of presence with that. I liked that there was that beautiful feeling in the beginning that quickly changed from surprise to seeing Diana snap into action. I really loved the action poses where we see her as a warrior reacting and posing a little differently. Obviously, the bracelets are up right away in an action stance and a defense stance, but it's a defense stance that obviously takes full advantage of what we know about the Amazonian bracelets. So that part was something that really struck me on this. You referenced a couple different things about her recognizing different things going on in her environment, the strategy part to Wonder Woman. I'm not going to say strategic, although I kind of just did. But that strategy part of Wonder Woman is something that I really like about her. It is something in the best storytellings with her I really like. This is a warrior. So she is going to behave like a warrior, somebody who's gone on the hunt, somebody who, you know, all of these things that we know about her come into play in her character in this. The writing in this story, the artwork in this story are really top notch in capturing that part of her that I really dig. And I was like really struck by in this. Man, does this hold up in its action? Because that sequence is great. And its balance of introducing us to a wide variety of characters in a way where we understand relationships early on between Diana and a lot of these characters, understanding the politics of Themyscira in this story very early on, because it's really important if you're going to get emotionally attached to this story arc and everything that's happening here. You need to understand that there is a big political structure going on here, and the reasons for it are far deeper than are initially told in the story. I love that that's an unfolding mystery in this arc as well. There's a lot of depth to this story that really make it engaging. It's just a terrific, great, well-written story. There's a lot of things that happen here that I would like to see brought in to the present day Wonder Woman. I'm anxious for Greg Rucka. This actually has me even more anxious for Greg Rucka taking over on Wonder Woman, because I think we're going to start getting this kind of depth. I've been really loving Wonder Woman, so don't get me wrong on anything I'm saying here. It's not an issue. It's not a criticism on Wonder Woman now. It's more of a, wow, I'm really excited about the character. I've been excited about her in the New 52. This has got me more excited for more expansion on the Wonder Woman mythos, which that year one story that's coming up, I'm really excited about. Even more after reading this.
Oh God, yeah. And I tell you, it's one of the things that caught me that I really appreciated, because we're talking art team here. The usage of non-traditional panels throughout the series, and they've been, it's not like this is anything new, but it's something that I don't remember when I was reading comics back then, seeing and noticing that kind of stuff. And throughout this whole contest, they really do some really cool usages of just a tilted panel or a different size or especially overlapping panels to show boom, 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 high action, multiple sequences. I thought that was something that, again, really struck me. And as you're saying, just the politics behind Paradise Island, behind Themyscira, that for me was, I was like, this is a kind of a cool story, and I was kind of chuckling at some of the innocence that the Amazons have, and because you see, more the modern day, version, they are very more warrior. They're more, I can't see them sitting around just, relaxing, chilling and watching someone paint a pot. I couldn't see the present day Amazons doing that. But for this group, it really fit. And it was kind of a neat thing, especially when you start pulling in Artemis's team into this whole universe. I was like, man, this is a neat thing. I want more of this. This is the kind of stuff that, it really does capture some cool, Wonder Woman Diana moments.
Yeah. That's part of the culture piece of it is something that's really important, because you're dealing with people that follow the gods, right? When you think of that culture, like in ancient Greece and things like that, you think a lot of not just combat. You think of so much, your philosophers, your artisans, and things like that from that era. So I really love that this arc embraced that aspect of them as well. Yes, these are warriors, but they're more than just that. And I think when you start adding that depth to these characters, I think they become that much more impressive in what they do, because it adds to the intelligence. If you're an artist, if you are a philosopher, if you are doing all those different things, plus you're a warrior on top of it, I think that makes you even more deadly, just because of the fact that you have that intelligence. But also think about artists and what they do well, right? They think outside the box. They're clever. They're crafty. They're creative. They explore. They try new things. If you have that balanced in with a warrior code, it just adds a whole new depth to you that I think is just really interesting. People are the sum of their parts, not just one aspect of themselves. And I love that everything you're saying is, I'm like nodding. I'm like, yeah, Jim, you're right. This is what's really cool about all this. And yeah, it's neat. It's a really neat story for that.
Athena is the god of war and wisdom, which is one of the things that always makes her kind of a little bit more dangerous than Ares, because she's not just the god of war. She's she's the goddess of wisdom as well. So you got that level of, strategery in there.
Oh.
Well, you already said,
I did. I made the mistake.
You opened
I opened this up. I did open this up. The bit with Hippolyta was interesting because I was somebody who weaved in and out of Wonder Woman. I'd read major arcs and then have to drop the book because of financial reasons. I would come back in and read another major arc. The relationship between Diana and her mother here was interesting. I'm like, what happened? What's going on with these two? And I like that Diana's noticing something's off about her mother, and it's making her question a whole bunch of things. This is pretty critical to this story because it leads to a lot of the problems that Diana is going to face later in this arc. So everything that's happening right in this first issue, it's setting up an unfolding mystery. This is what I really love. I've been talking recently about what are some of my hopes for Rebirth, right? Well, what am I really hoping for? I'm hoping for runs like this. When you have writers have the opportunity to have a larger run, they can start sprinkling a mystery early on and let that germinate and let us as readers, things that we take as very small mother-daughter relationship problems turn into, oh my gosh, here's what you didn't know behind the scenes, and why people are in shock and awe of Diana's appearance, and what Hippolyta's really hiding behind there, but also how it plays much later into the storyline. Talk about swerves, lots of swerves in this storyline that you think one thing's going on, and all of a sudden something unfolds, and you're like, oh, that's what's happening. And I really have found that engaging about this in this storyline. And really I'm going to say this, I'm sure, multiple times throughout our two-parter of doing this. This is a story that's a must-read. And if you've read it before, I think it's a must-revisit because of how well it holds up. Talk about a show talk about a character that really is ripe for a television series. Remember there was that rumor of the Amazon series for a while before the whole movie thing kicked off? This is making me wish we got that.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because this storyline, this type of arc, you can only do on a TV show. You can't do this on film, not to this kind of depth. And I'm thrilled that we're getting a movie with her. I'm really anxious to see that because she was so much the one of the best parts of Batman v Superman for me that I'm excited to see more of that. This is the type of arc you need to take a look at as far as how do we get Wonder Woman right on screen. You gotta pull in elements of this, because this stuff is really, really great. The mom was fantastic. I really loved that bit because there were times when I was reading this where I'm just like, I want to, what are you doing? This is Wonder Woman. This is Diana. This is your daughter. You should be standing behind her. I like that she felt very regal, though. And you're like, you can tell as you're trying to figure out this character and what's going on, you can tell that this is somebody where you could see why Diana would question her, but yet realize my mother's also the queen. She wears multiple hats, for lack of a pun. It is something where you can see why Diana would question her, but also would assume some of this is because she is a queen. Some of this is due to time passage. To lose a decade or to have a difference of a decade, could you imagine, like, you and I talk regularly, right? Could you imagine if, like, for me, we didn't talk in like 2 weeks? For you, it was 2 years?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a much shorter span than we're talking about here, but you will have had experiences in those 2 years that you can't possibly catch me up on in a conversation. That 2 years will change you in a way that you probably don't realize because of the fact that it was subtle. It happened over a 2-year span, but at the end of it, you're somehow changed. For me, it'll be kind of like, whoa, what happened to that dude during that time? Because I wasn't there with you for that experience. Now, for them, it's a decade. A decade for what was a couple months for Wonder Woman was decade for them. That's a part of this storyline that I think is just really interesting. And them making that kind of leap in this just added a whole sense of this is really the way to shake up a status quo. Because you've taken now the whole of Themyscira, and what you knew before that couple months now has been completely changed because a decade has happened of battle behind the scenes that has set up different camps and factions. And I really loved the way that this arc played all of that out. Because it does give a sense of longevity. It's worth rereading this one after you've read it. Because I read this twice, the whole run that we're doing right now, recently. Just because of the fact that I wanted to really be brushed up on it for this. That second read through, knowing again what the storyline was all about, really added a real sense in each of these scenes with Hippolyta, but then later with other members of just how much has happened to these people during that time.
Well, I did my standard, what I do is, I do the read through, I do the second art read through, and then I do a third read through of, just another read through knowing this. And I tell you, each time I got something out of this, especially when I was doing my art read through. Oh my God, did I love that. And it's these sequences where Hippolyta's telling Diana what happened, where everything from the other Amazons showing up, the initial attack, the invasion, and that, and all of a sudden, then Cersei's double cross on them, taking them to the demon realm, the fight in the demon realm, all these stuff was, the way they did this artwork, because they did a lot of the, again, as I said, some, nice, really cool overlapping panels showing the action. It was the inner dialogue panels, with a couple dialogue balloons, but it was really, they told a massive story in a couple pages, and you didn't feel like you got cheated. I would have loved this. They could have done a miniseries on this section, and I would have picked it up in a heartbeat, because this sounds like a really cool story, but we got enough of the story. And I think that for me was a really good job on the creation of this, because they told me a full story, beginning, middle, end, and then the ramifications are currently going on in the story. So they took this massive epic story, shrunk it down, put it in place, bam, we're moving forward. And that for me, on top of, as I said, just I love the artwork throughout these sequences, throughout the various fight scenes and just everything you got going on. I was like, dang, this is really cool, man. This was one of those things like, wow, this is kind of an amazing thing here.
Yeah, the Amazon Civil War piece was something that I really quite enjoyed from this whole thing, because you're right. They played that out really, really well. I felt like it was a story that they let the backstory to like everything that's going on, Hippolyta's distance or difference about her. It really gave this sense of, you don't understand what's happened to us as a people. It isn't just what happened to me. It's what happened to us as a people. And when you are a leader like that, that's going to change this. The great part about this is it put up a smokescreen of sorts to the sheer depth of what was going on with Hippolyta. Because initially you kind of pass off a lot of Hippolyta's almost being cold to her daughter to being because of these events. So talk about your swerves. What you find out later about her comes as like, oh my gosh, and this is on top of it too? This would have been enough. The whole Cersei thing. And the Civil War battle, the fact that the Amazons were ripped, their whole island was ripped. I mean, this is meant to take your city, and like your city's all of a sudden yanked up and thrown into a demon dimension. That's gonna cause a bad day. But on top of that, you've got everything else in Hippolyta's history that comes crashing down around her. This is really just an interesting story arc in the way that it all plays out. The Cersei bits were amazing, because that's a character that, Diana's rogues gallery, aside from the cheetah, that's the one I think historically everyone like jumps to. I think the cheetah. Cersei is an incredible villain. And when she's done right and you get this real sense of depth to what the character can do, I mean, not only did she cause a civil war and factions of the Amazons were brainwashed into following her, but she also yanked up the whole island and transported it to another dimension. I mean, the depth of that shows the sense of power to some of her villains. This story arc does a really great job of not only pulling in villains from around the DC universe, but also making a really good use of Diana's villains and showing how her relationships with people who are adversaries, because of her compassion, as well as her strength, are what set her apart and make her different than the other characters in the DC universe. Yes, she is this tough warrior princess, and I love that about the character, but it's more than that. You mentioned wisdom before. Diana's very wise, very compassionate to people. She's very good at building relationships. This story arc shows a lot of relationships, from humans to villains to adversaries, and I use those terms. I know they're kind of the same, but it's not really simple what she has in this book, and also her own family of Amazons in a way that I just find the landscape in this is pretty well crafted, and that's the part I really love, because a lot of the stuff you and I have been talking about in the New 52 that we like. Man, the battle sequences are beautiful.
Oh God, yeah. Again, it's the beautiful tragedy of war. Mm-hmm. That's a tough thing to capture, where they can still maintain it, and there's plenty of gruesomeness. You can see a high body count, but you also can tell they're giving as well as getting. And I liked how Hippolyta's spin on the story as she's telling it. Talking about with Artemis's people. How they're like, because they worshipped combat above all else, my sister's people agreed to guard the outer perimeter. Later, when Artemis tells the story, she tells it a little bit differently.
Oh, yeah.
And again, it was even the art sequence when she's saying how we rewarded their valor and forgiven their past and gave them this section of Themyscira. And they show you them leaving, waving, and smiling. Yay! later, when Artemis again tells that story, they take that sequence and they make little changes in the faces, and they make little changes. And I think, again, that was something I was like, oh, that is cool. And that was something I went back and forth and looked at, like, yeah, they went shot for shot, but they changed a little smile from a smile to a scowl, and a wave from a wave to, well, they probably could have given a Stone Cold salute, but they didn't do that in the comics.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. And those are some of the things that I found most interesting about this, was the fact that changes of perspective. When you are on one side of the fence, you have a story. And isn't it the best stories, the ones where when you see the people that you originally think are the villains, but then see things from their perspective and see how they may have been wronged or misunderstood? Yes, they were with Cersei. So there's a reason to look at them and go, they were misguided. You know, when people are misguided, you can look back and scold them and be right to do so and go, they were so in the wrong for what they did. And true. But then when you pull back and go, but you're forgetting about this, and this, afterwards, when they were all fighting together, right? This sort of gift that was given to them, at the end, that battle should have really brought all of them together.
Yeah.
And they should have embraced each other as sisters and kind of been a part of the group. Instead, they were again set off into this less than desirable area of...
it's a bit of a fixer-upper.
Yes, exactly. And that was the part that I found really interesting on this one, because politics are always interesting in comics when they're done well. And they really embrace the fact that sometimes things look really good based on perspective until you actually see the real facts of what that all means. This was chock full of that, and that part I found really engaging.
Yeah, and it's funny because even as we're talking, because we know Hippolyta put a more positive spin on it, but to be honest, Artemis probably put a more negative spin on it. Who knows how much of, in between the two stories is the actual truth on what happened on the wall. And I think that would be another thing. TV show I watch, The Affair. Oh, yeah. Where they take, it's a Showtime show, and they take the same events, but they tell it from two different perspectives. When the season one, it was the man's perspective, then they showed the female's perspective in The Affair. They redid some of the same scenes, and each one saw it differently. Sometimes they were wearing different clothing. It was a really cool just way to do a TV show, where they're showing the same events but different perspective. This kind of stuff was the same thing that happened with this. And then even looking at just how when Diana's explaining what she's been doing these past couple months and how Hippolyta's upset, I love the fact that they showed several hours later. Diana was going because it has been a couple months since she's talked, so she was giving a full report of all the different stuff she did. And it was one of those things where going through that, you see just the scowl on Hippolyta's face that she's like, I'm disappointed in you. I'm like, what? She saved all these people. Wait, what are you talking about? And I love that, again, the politics and just what was going on. Initially I'm thinking, as you said before, okay, she's been through a lot with everything that happened. The 10 years in a demon dimension can have a habit of changing people, but what else is going on here? And I think that for me was a great way to give you kind of an introduction to there's more to this story than just what they're throwing out there. I thought that was a great, introduction and kind of a teaser to what's coming.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. The amount of teasers in this that were done in a way where they were organic in the story. Like, you were left hanging on certain things, but nothing felt awkward about that. They were parts where, we're feeding you little bits of information along the way, while also keeping action on the pages. This book is filled with lots of action, and that's something that you always want to see in a Wonder Woman title. You want to see that these are warriors. You want to get excited for battles and seeing what they're like. The other thing, too, that I want to comment on with the art, great handling of a vast, wide array of locations. There really is a sense of tone change in each of the locations that are presented, from being beautiful to dark to dreary to bright to, because it really is one of those things when you get into Boston, for example.
Yeah.
Boston in and of itself has a wide variety of different locations that are well handled in this book that, some of them are very bright and sunny and exciting and welcoming. Others are very dreary and dark and dangerous. And I loved the handling of that as well. It wasn't just on the island. This book really visually, to your point earlier, as far as it feeling very current, it did. It felt very current in this one, which I think is hard to do because the technologies to create comics were not there the way they are now. I think there was a lot of things going on in the early stages of what led to, how comics are produced today. You can look through comics and see just a wide variety of cool eras where there are things that benefited how we read comics today. They did some really clever things, I think, during this time with experimenting on creating another era of comics that I think, are enjoying today.
Oh, God, yeah, yeah. Here's something I'm wondering. We don't now, knowing how this Hippolyta's motivation and all that stuff, because she throws out this initial thing saying that when you go back to the world of man, you have to take a council of 5 Amazons. If Diana had been like, oh, okay, no problem, would there have still been this contest? Would have Hippolyta found a reason for the contest, or would she have let her daughter go with this 5 additional Amazons for support?
Oof.
Because here's how I read it. The first time I read it, I was like, what? Then, as stuff started going on later, my first thought was this whole time Hippolyta is doing everything she knows her daughter will fight against her just to get this adversary between them. She needs to have a new contest. And this was one of those things where she was hoping that could really get to really spark the need for the contest.
Well, if you take a look at everything that played out with the contest, her actions of leaving out Artemis's group from the contest, I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but we're going to talk about this today anyway. So we might as well go to it, because you're making an excellent point. She did that purposefully to get Diana to push for the vote, so she did not have to be the one to take the blame for it.
Right.
So Diana is the one that gave the impassioned speech encouraging that. So Hippolyta wanted that.
Yeah, Hippolyta wanted it. That was the thing that's why I'm saying this, and this was something that, was funny, because when I first read this, I was like, I don't know. But, when I get into the next issue and then issue after that, before the big reveal on everything's going on, I started thinking back to these sequences, started thinking back to this, that Hippolyta is trying to get Diana out of the role of Wonder Woman. And I was like, I was going through my head trying to find the motivation, and the motivation I'm going to come up with later on. It's kind of a neat story in my head, going on inside my head, that, why, Hippolyta's motivation. And I actually, not this issue, but within the next issue, I start thinking that Hippolyta is really Cersei. I start going through. So for most of my read of the contest, I'm thinking Hippolyta is actually Cersei. Mm-hmm. In disguise, and it was funny because, and I don't know if they intentionally wanted us to think that, but that was the first thought that started when, as this was going on, I was like, something's not up with Hippolyta. She's, that immediately went to, okay, that maybe that's not Hippolyta. And I thought that was kind of a cool way in the fact that how the story played out.
I think you're right. I think some of that is deliberate. I think you're right. I think at the very least, I don't know if they wanted you to think that she's Cersei, or at least to be questioning it. What is going on with her right now and why? I think you're supposed to be at the very least at doing that. So that part I really quite enjoyed about this story. I'm with you. That part was quite interesting. Mala and Diana are taking that walk. You mentioned the bit where she runs at the Jocasta's pottery sequence. It leads to the introduction of Artemis and her people. And I do want to reference, when you see the two that are traveling with Artemis, both of them have a different, either a left-handed or right-handed draw.
They each are doing a left-handed draw, and you look at Artemis.
No. One's doing... Oh, wait, no, you're right. They both are. You're right.
They both have left-handed draws.
You're right.
And later, when you see Artemis draw her bow, she does a left-handed draw as well.
Right.
So Artemis's people do a left-handed draw. I don't know if it's a regular for all of them, but for most of the ones we see in action, we see left-handed draws. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Do you remember anyone doing a right-handed draw?
Diana. In the archery contest between Artemis and Diana that we're about to have, in a couple pages, Diana does a right-handed draw. They do left-handed.
That's real interesting. So I wonder was there anybody in Artemis's people that did a right-handed draw, or was it just Diana?
I don't remember seeing any of Artemis's people doing it, but that's, again, it could be them or not, because later on we see there's another archery shot that's a very famous shot, arrow for arrow, princess. That person also left-handed draw, and actually she's the Patrice right over there.
Yeah, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it was something that it was something I noticed. As I said on that read through, I saw them like, oh wow. Then I started looking through and then trying to see if any, and they all, yeah, I think that's just a thing they do. Whether it's, and again, if you're, if you have a unit that is training constantly together, you would have a lot of similarities like that. You would have, a natural just progression with that. And there's, and depending on like, yeah, I don't know. It's, I thought that was kind of a cool thing. And I was kind of like, wow, that's neat.
I love that Artemis's people, they don't have the white on like the rest of the Amazons. They each have their own colors, their own outfits, but the thing that links them is there's this sense of these are people that are foraging. These are people that are trying to survive. These are people that rely on each other for that purpose. These are people that are very angry. These are people that are disenfranchised from the Amazons. You catch that very quickly in their introduction and their mannerisms and the way that they carry themselves. Seeing the Amazons first, the Hippolyta's group, and seeing how peaceful things are for them, but then seeing this group and clearly there being something very different, I thought was a very sharp contrast and a great choice in this one, because it does make you immediately interested in them and knowing more about them, which is important when you're introducing characters that have to be a focal point in the storyline. Because if you're not buying into Artemis, at least as somebody you're interested in knowing more about right from the beginning, you got a problem, because that is a draw in this story. You've got to be at least as interested in who Artemis is and what she's all about as you are in what's going on with Diana for this to work. And I thought that was really well done, because I found the character of Artemis very interesting.
Oh God, yeah. And again, a great introduction for her with her shooting an arrow right at Diana. And just again, the initial confrontation, but it was so neat to see Diana not just initially start throwing punches. And even when they get to a heated discussion point, they're not, it doesn't get to a physical throwdown yet. And it's one of those things, and that's something the neat stuff about Diana is you get to that person who is trying to reach out, who's treating her like a sister, who's trying to pull her back in the fold. From beginning of this story all the way through the very end, she's the person who's trying to bring, them back into the fold and trying to, deal with that, peace and not, violence. And I thought that, again, for the Amazon warrior that Diana is, she's also that diplomat. She's also that agent of peace. She's also, and it's, it's kind of a cool, because you think about the current stuff we're doing with her being the god of war and the conflict that she has with being with everything that goes along with it. You're seeing that same person here as you're seeing there. And that's why this character, this story stands up to date. This is something that could happen in the current universe. And that was something you jump right into. And I was like, man, this is a cool story.
One of the things that's great about seeing Diana and Themyscira with that whole concept that there's the enchantment that keeps her from using her powers here, or being able to access her powers here, she's the same person. Yeah. A lot of times when heroes get depowered, there is that period of time where it's like they're learning how to be the same person, and kind of connect with who the person was when they're in the cape and collar, they have their armor suit on, or they have their Superman powers or whatever. That doesn't happen with Diana. It's like, same girl, no powers. Big deal. Give me a sword. Let's go. A spear,
she
sword.
Still can throw down. She's still dangerous.
And I really like the fact that you have to almost be reminded that, hey, I don't have, by the way, no powers right now, but I'm still going to beat you up. And I loved that about her in this, the sense of the warrior code, that I think she would still fly into the same battles. If not fly, she'd run into the same battles that she would fly into when she has her powers. It just says a lot about her and what drives her as a character. And I think that's what makes her unique and interesting. I'm a huge fan of Wonder Woman now. And I'm not just saying, looking back at this story arc, the New 52, I think, has done a great job with the character as well. Wonder Woman's one of those characters I really just look forward to reading every month now. And it is stories like this that really, foundationally, made me understand the character. And it's one of the reasons why it's important to do this story on the show, I think, just because it's really one of the better Wonder Woman stories out there. Not only what it does to kind of shake up the status quo of Wonder Woman at the time, but how it defines who Diana is and what Diana's all about. It's not just the costume that makes her who she is. She is this person at her core. 24/7, with, without powers, in a secret identity, not in a secret identity, when she's dealing with Amazons, when she's dealing with humans, when she's dealing with villains. She is who she is. I think it's one of the things we like about Superman, right? It's, we know who Superman is. He's clearly defined. When we see him as Clark Kent, that we always talked about the difference between Superman and Clark Kent, and there's that third person that's somewhere in between. That's really who this guy is. That's the guy that, 24/7, you see him step out and do something and be unique. Diana's got those qualities too. And it's something that I really find that's interesting about the character. I actually think it's one of the reasons why in the New 52 I've been so into them as a couple, because it's amazing for how much differences there are between the two in their backgrounds. They are two people that clearly know who they are and what their core values are. And I could see that being something that between two people would attract them to each other. That confidence in me,
Yeah.
That part is something that I find really interesting about the character. Do you find yourself now, I know you've referenced on the show more than once, and we were kind of talking about this, I think most recently on the Superman v. Batman episode, or Batman v. Superman episode, I should say, flip-flop. When you were talking about how much you've become a fan of Wonder Woman, if you had to drop down budget-wise to, just a handful of titles, would Wonder Woman be one of those titles now where you'd have to say, man, I'm going to have I've got to really consider having Wonder Woman in the mix? Where would you be on that?
Oh, I'm solid with she would have to be on the mix. And depending on how far I'd have to go down is because, like with the Batman's, the Superman Wonder Woman title, if that was sticking around, then maybe that would be my Wonder Woman fix. But still, it would be a tough call because I really do like the character now, and I think it's one of those that could I accept just her being in get a Justice League book because it had multiple characters, but yes, in a way, but I still would want more of just her story, and I think I would actually be more in line to drop a group book and get an individual Batman, get an individual Superman. For me, she is on the level of the Trinity.
Yeah,
I think it would be hard for me to drop her overall, especially with some of the stuff they're announcing that's coming out of it's coming out of Rebirth, and just I'm like I gotta see what's gonna happen with her now.
Oh, I think she's one of the most exciting announcements out of Rebirth.
Yeah, I'm very pumped for the Wonder Woman series, and it's funny. Again, I've said multiple times throughout these 10 years where if you had told the kid back all those years ago, oh yeah, you'd be really excited about a lot of female superheroes, I would have laughed in your face like I'm not gonna. That's a girl comic. I chuckle at myself at just how I thought back then, as compared to how I look at this stuff now.
When she's shooting in that one, contest, when she's firing the arrow, and you see her splitting arrows and things like that, I really love that motion where you see the motion of her hand raising the bow and firing.
Yeah.
You get this sense of speed. Is something that I find it's hard to do in comics, I think, because of static panels, but it's something I've always enjoyed in comics growing up. I mean, I think your best artists, all the way from my childhood straight on through to present day, have always created this really interesting sense of motion on something that has no motion. and I really love the way that they do that.
And I got to comment on something. She didn't split the arrow. Artemis split her arrow.
Oh, I know, but I'm saying
You're saying she's splitting arrows. My God, that wasn't Diana. And then for me, because that was the thing, I'm agreeing with you on how the motion and the fluidness of her arm coming up, and then thunk and thunk, and then they show that panel with Artemis where you can see left-handed draw. The string is still slightly vibrating. And I liked how they did the effects with the string where they did the lines on either side. So you can tell she just fired. I thought that, again, I'm agreeing with you on how the artwork gave us motion on this and how artwork gave us this type of, what looks like arm coming out, firing, thunk and thunk, splitter, but also that thing, as I said, with the string still looks like it's moving. I thought those were, again, the art usage, panels overlapping, it's all the stuff I've been talking about. really hit it out of the park for me. And especially, this was something I really enjoyed in my art read through. I recommend anybody just take an issue, don't read this, look at the images.
No, and you're right. I think I said a pronoun when I was talking about splitting the arrow, and you're right to call me on that if it sounded like I was talking about Diana. I really meant the whole splitting arrow sequence. I thought the motion, the sense of motion in that whole sequence was really fantastic because you see it with the arrows themselves. You see it with the bow being raised, and to your point, you see it in the. I love the fact that the string is still vibrating. That whole sequence is great. I also love the confident, almost cocky expression on Artemis, because that's really important in the sense that Artemis is supposed to be this anti-hero person that they're bringing in who doesn't quite get our world. The trick with anti-heroes sometimes and where they're dangerous is you're either going to like them or you're going to hate them. It's far more interesting when you put them in a story where you learn to like them because you learn more about the main character, Diana, in this whole sequence of events. And I find that I was rallying myself around her throughout the entire story. But I did find with this one that I'm like, I am really learning to like Artemis, I think the same way that Diana is along the way. And I really liked that part of this storyline too, that it wasn't Artemis bad, Diana good. To me, the complexity of it not being that simple was what I found so interesting in this story. Which is far more fun than if you don't just blatantly don't like the characters. A little too simplistic. I liked that I was conflicted in what I wanted to see happen as the story came on because I started to really enjoy Artemis as well in this story. And I think that only happens if you manage to keep a nice balance of here's what's going on with Diana, here's what's going on with Artemis. And I think it added a different emotional spin to this story.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, and I'm agree. As you're talking, I'm nodding my head about liking Artemis. And initially, that cocky arrogance, and you're like, oh, this is going to be good, And I knew how the contest was going to end. I knew Artemis was going to win, going into this. So it was, something that, like, oh, okay. But it was still kind of nice to see the buildup and see that competition between them, see just a friendship forming and seeing them just actually what kind of happened, to get to the end point.
Now, this was during the time of the whole 0 Hour event that this was going on. So I was reading at the time quite a bit of DC Comics and grabbed almost all the Zero issues at the time. So I was really, what I was doing, I didn't have a lot of budget at this time to, be spending on comics. So what I was often doing is selling older comics to buy new comics because I'm a reader, and I want to do that. So I gave up runs of books in order to be able to read more of what was going on in the new titles. So 0 Hour event came on. They started doing these Zero issues and releasing them. And I'm like, wow, I want to read as many of these as possible. It was a time where I was reading, and this is careful when I say this because it's not an issue of me choosing DC over Marvel or anything like that or quality or anything. I was reading a mixture of DC and Marvel, and because this event was going on, I started getting so interested on what are some of these titles that are going to spin out of 0 Hour and what is the status quo change going to be of these characters and things like that. I wound up dumping a lot of my Marvel books and going to DC, just like Marvel fans do when they, have a real good event. I'm actually a mixed hybrid fan. There's been a lot of times when I've jumped ship to both companies because of events that were going on that got me interesting. But this one was one where I'm like, oh, I want to read more of this. Wonder Woman was one of the titles that I was reading because of the 0 Hour event. I just got really excited for what they were doing here. And this Zero issue, because they just announced at the end of the issue, the cliffhanger was the council has decided and they're going to choose a contest for a new Wonder Woman. They left you with that cliffhanger, and then you jump into the Zero issue. Takes us right into part 2 of this, where Diana's having the debate with her mother about you're choosing a new Wonder Woman, and you're right. The buttons were being pushed right from issue 91 straight into this, straight on through. Diana was being played through a lot of this, and it was very subtle in how it was done. And that part I find very interesting. I actually would say people that like shows like Game of Thrones and stuff like that, if you never read Wonder Woman, you really need to read this. Because I do think that there's some linkage between that kind of storytelling and what people like. And I'm not oversimplifying and saying they're exactly alike. I don't mean it that way. But the drama that unfolds in this is really similar to what I dig about shows like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, actually, and as soon as you said it, I started nodding my head going, yeah, this definitely has some Game of Thrones style to it. And it has, again, it's also the that kind of that whole the royal bloodlines and just the royal political intrigue. When you're dealing with the political intrigue on a royalty type family, or whether you're dealing with it on like U.S. politics or any other the foreign government politics, each one has their own little different twist and feel to it. And this one has all that really great intrigue, and it was really this sequence here that really had me starting to think that's not Hippolyta, and especially everything, because we saw what happened with Cersei. I was like, that's got to, and it was this whole banter going back and forth between the two of them that really had this whole locked in my head this whole time I'm reading this, going, that's got to be Cersei in disguise. And I even noticed that Hippolyta has this brooch around her neck. It's got this big red jewel, and the artist did a really cool thing where they showed the flashing, kind of like the bright light catching on it. And me in my head, I saw that. I go, you know what? Right there, that's like a magic thing triggering, showing that it's magic. And I'm seeing all this different stuff that actually wasn't really there, but in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, that's got to be it. And I even went back and looked at the images of Cersei, seeing if I could say, maybe the eyes are kind of similar. And I really went all in on that it's she is Cersei conspiracy theory while this is going on, just because this soul did not seem like what I would imagine Hippolyta was doing. And why would she do something? There's got to be, and I love the fact that the whole time I'm thinking that it's got to be seriously, I'm looking for this conspiracy, is because this just didn't, something was off here. Something didn't, and I'm not saying poorly, it just felt like something, like she's holding something back. There's something missing. She's hiding something. And I love the fact that a written story that's flat on a page could really get me to hear voice fluctuations and really get me to think, there's something not right here. And especially, and a lot of times when like they show the close-ups of Hippolyta's eyes, you kind of see a little bit sinister to them. And I'm like, man, she can't be the right person. It's got to be something. And I think that for me was something that really had me going throughout this story, that the whole time I'm thinking, okay, that's not actually Hippolyta. Something else is going to change.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about this arc was the fact that I said everything you're saying, so I'm agreeing with that. But there were also times where I was thinking through the sequence, and I'm like, a decade's passed from her, and she referenced the fact that she was assuming that her daughter was going to think this. She was assuming that her daughter was going to do that. She was assuming that there would be this progression in Wonder Woman. There comes a point, in what Wonder Woman's mission is in the world, and she refers to it as being Diana's office. Whereas we look at Wonder Woman as that's her identity. Well, no, it's a office and a mantle that she inherited from her people. That's meant to be a certain representation of her people. And I liked that as she was saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, that really is kind of true in how the whole premise was out there. So that exploration, I think, also separates the Wonder Woman mythos from Batman and from Superman and what goes on there. It's just a different way of looking at it, and separates her as a hero. I found myself in the debate, especially in my second read-through, kind of going back through and thinking to myself, well, I can see some of what Hippolyta's saying here, yet at the same time I was holding on to a lot of what you're saying. I'm like, Hippolyta's bad. But that part, it's funny, even when you know where the story's going, there is that part of you that's thinking to yourself, Hippolyta's this, Hippolyta's that. Yeah. And I really liked how that whole thing never really leaves you in the story, even though you can understand and justify some of her politics in all of this. That part makes, I think, the story far more intriguing.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, second, third read-throughs, when you know what's going on, yeah. It adds to the level of intrigue. And that's when I really started looking at, okay, Hippolyta's, knowing what the reason why Hippolyta is doing what she's doing, like, okay, she wants to get Diana off. She wants to throw her off her game. And she's doing all these little stuff, and you start seeing the stuff that she's doing to get Diana off her game so she won't win the contest, we know why she does it later on, and it was a really cool, just again, the intrigue and just the manipulation, dare I say it, the strategery of Hippolyta, really played out heavily through what would normally be just a simple dialogue. Just would be a dialogue to advance the story. No, it's not just advancing the story. It's really laying in the groundwork of who and what Hippolyta is. And I think that for me was something I was like, man, that's awesome. And it was something that I didn't completely see the full levels that the story was telling the first time through. It wasn't until afterwards, when you know what's going to happen and why it's happening, that you can really go, man, that's some cool writing.
You said, dare I say it? What if I said no?
I still would have said it.
I know. So it was as you were saying it, I'm like sitting here, I'm like, well, I really had no choice in this. You're going to do it anyway.
You didn't. No, it's that'll be the last time today. Maybe.
No, it won't be. The debate over the people of Boston and Diana's office, and is Themyscira still her home? Because she comes home and look what she's getting smacked down the second she walked through the door. So, needless to sit there and say, have I outgrown this place? Is it still part of who I am? Is it not? Her debate I thought was really interesting there. Is it still my home? Then you flash to a sequence where she's with Mala. There is parts of it that feel uniquely home. And I really liked that part of this, that it wasn't as simple as, because you got to believe, why is Diana taking place in the contest? Why is Diana doing anything that she's doing in this story arc? And you have to see that it's not just her debates with Mom that are happening here. You have to see her interaction with her sisters, the fellow Amazons on the island, in order to understand her motivations. It's not just Artemis and her crew. It's Mala and the Amazonian sisters that she's got that do rally behind her and do believe in her. It's her compassion for these people who are friends. She has an opportunity here. Talk about somebody, you and I often talked about that, joke around about the reluctant leader thing. I think with Diana, you see some points in time in this one where she acts as a leader.
Yeah.
She oftentimes takes a fall or steps back a little bit to give somebody else a boost to motivate them. And if I'm going into battle, I'm following somebody like that. Like Diana's one of those people that you can see why people would follow her into battle by some of her choices. It's like, listen, you can do this. You can push yourself more. And through her successes, Mala grows in this. And you see her loyalty to Diana, which was already there, continue to grow. But also her skills continue to grow. It gives her confidence when she's dealing with Artemis and Artemis's people later on, because of the fact that Diana's given her that boost as well. I really loved seeing that because it's a multi-layered story that has a lot of dimension and depth to it. I found myself in this going, yeah, Diana, I'd follow her into battle. Diana's one of those characters that, like, there's a lot of heroes that you can imagine yourself being. Diana's one of those characters where you're like, I can imagine following her. Batman's a guy I can imagine following. Superman's a guy I can imagine following. I can't imagine being those characters. Characters like Jack Knight, Starman, what I like about him, Jack's a little bit more grounded. So, and he has a lot of flaws as well as his strengths. So you feel like you could be him. You know what I mean? Because you've gone on similar journeys. These characters are interesting because these are characters that are different tier where you want to follow them to places, and you want to be one of the people that help them succeed. You want to be a Mala, and this one really, I mean, it's kind of the interesting thing about the character and what I find interesting. I love the training for these combat sequences that happen on the island. Just seeing that this is something that's part of a daily ritual for these people. They don't just do this, work out 3 times a week. No, they're on every single day and honed. This is not a place, if you're planning to attack, that you want to take lightly. Because these people are always at a ready. They sleep on their swords.
You sleep with your sword. You gotta love that, man. And I tell you, the Mala character was absolutely one of those where when they first introduced her, I kind of dismissed her. Yeah. But she's one of those that by the end of this, I'm like Team Mala. I'm like, all right, she's awesome, because she's, again, you talk about how she just grew, and how you could see from the beginning of the contest to the end of the contest, Mala was a warrior. She was, a butt kicker. And, these initial sequences with her, I liked how she's that confidant. She lends Diana the gown because, Diana didn't think it would be appropriate for for her to continue wearing the Wonder Woman outfit since there's the new contest. And she's that confidant, that advisor, and even to the point where she's trying to, she's choosing her words carefully. And Diana's like, no, you don't have to pick your words with me. I get you. You're my buddy. And I thought that was kind of a cool moment. But then even later on, she goes, even presidents and prime ministers of the man's world are reconfirmed every so often. And I thought that for me was a really cool, just statement on her part. That she's like, hey, yeah, you should be Wonder Woman, but you know what? This is a reconfirming for you. This is a whole new thing. And, and it was like, you wouldn't want to be trapped as Wonder Woman without a chance having another life. And I thought that, again, that's a good friend who's sitting there saying, hey, yeah, this is a good thing for you. And I thought that was a kind of a cool, kind of a really cool moment. And just, again, she was another one of those characters. I was like, man, I wonder if they did more with her later on.
Yeah, and I don't remember, because I did end up reading the Byrne run after this one. Not the whole. I don't think I read the whole thing, because again, it was budget issues at the time. Something that doggone budget
Yeah.
always got in the way with comics for me, because I remember putting a considerable amount of resources towards jumping on a lot of the books with Zero Hour, but then I had to pare back again. And at that time, but it was because I was into following the event and trying to follow all the Zero issues. I did read the Byrne run, and I forget about Mala, if she came in to the event or afterwards, because that's sometimes what happens when a new writer comes on board. They keep some of the supporting cast, but not all of it. And I don't remember. I think it's very telling that I don't remember a ton about Mala, but admittedly, I didn't read everything afterwards to know whether or not she did come back in. It's also been a long time since I've read the Byrne run. Watch, I'll go read the Byrne run again and find out that like Mala was a key figure.
A major character. Yeah.
Which honestly could be the case as well. I don't distinctly remember it. The good thing this Zero issue did was it gave you a history of the original contest and put a lot of things in play as far as the mythos. In this story arc, in this particular run, the idea was that Steve Trevor's mom was actually one of the key people that came to Themyscira 50 years earlier and it helped out the people. So the Wonder Woman costume has a lot of nods back to Steve's mom. It also set up why Steve was so welcomed on the island, considering their stance on men. It was because of the respect to the mother, not that they wanted him there. And that was an interesting take that this story did with that. This particular run of Wonder Woman, I should say, because this was getting in the 90s at this point in time, 90s in the issue numbers. And this run had really established some interesting background mythos. Zero issue is always a good time where you can kind of revisit and kind of let people know, hey, this is the lore. This is how Diana became who she is. This is what we know about the story. The pole battles, the whole, Diana overcoming, Diana using the mask. The mask, I love that in this storyline, this was the reintroduction, I should say, of the mask that allowed Diana to participate in the contest, but also that the mask comes up later and plays a pivotal role in some of the other flashback sequences in this story. I like that nothing was a throwaway. That mask was cool.
Well, and that's the thing with this issue, because I loved how this was the origin, of Wonder Woman, how she became Wonder Woman, but it wasn't just a throwaway. And it was how they brought it in. Again, multiple panels, really cool, awesome action sequences, but that whole mask of Proteus really had me going, because not only did it have the connection we'll see later in the back, but again, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, okay, that's how Cersei is doing it. That's how Cersei's making everyone think she's Hippolyta. I'm like, that's gotta be it. Oh, cool. And I'm thinking, as I'm reading this, going, oh, that's really awesome. I'm wondering how Diana's gonna figure it out and demask her, and I'm thinking I got all this stuff going through my head as I'm reading issue 0. And it was funny because, later on I come up with a different person that Hippolyta is, next issue I start thinking it's maybe somebody else. And once again, the mask is playing a part of how she is, pulling off the disguise. And there's like so many different stuff that ran through my head, but a lot of it really coming out of this sequence. And again, it was a really cool usage of the origin, really cool way to further this, contest story. And I was like, really I was impressed by this, because a lot of times when they go back through and they retell an origin, it's like, okay, let's get through it. This one was like, this was a kind of a neat story. And I was like, later on, it plays out, and it actually is part of why this had to be told.
When they went to the area where Artemis's people are located, because Diana at this point has discovered that they've been eliminated from the contest. They aren't allowed to participate. Again, what we know is that this was done as a setup. But Diana goes there with Artemis and starts to learn something about that place. And the thing that I love about Artemis is, at this point in time, you aren't sure what to think of Artemis, but you get to see a more softer and rational side of her when you see her with her people. So when Trigana, who's lost the leg, hands her the spear, and Trigana's immediately ready to say, I'm no sister of one of Hippolyta's brood, but then sees Diana's face. And that was the first indication that, wait, now there's something going on. She's like that face, and I was trying to figure that out. I'm like, it can't be. What a great setup that was as we're going through. And then there's that other Mala who is there. And again, you get to see just what these people have been through. A demon spit fire in my face. Look what happened to me. These are a people that they went through the same battle that their Amazon sisters did, and they've been cast aside. It really did add a whole different spin to this crowd. And I was glad they did this, because too often you have these factions and you don't get to see them from the inside. You see them gradually turn, and some of the times where factions like this will become good guys, but it often happens much earlier if you get to see them from this perspective. And doing this early in the story, because this is only the second issue into this arc, was a really smart move if you're going to be putting another character into the role of Wonder Woman. You got to get behind the scenes and understand what motivates and drives her. She's not just this brash person you see on the outside. There's more to her that makes her far more interesting.
Oh God, yeah. And again, putting Diana in this world, putting her in this, other version of the island, you see, again, she immediately is reaching out to them as her sister, and she's sitting there, and it was a really cool, again, just showing Diana being Diana, and even showing the statue. That's her image. And again, once again, got me completely going on whole conspiracy theory on who Hippolyta is now. I'm like, oh my God. And then the other Mala person, like, maybe we're dealing with a time jump, and this is actually Diana's friend who somehow aged, and all these different things were flashing through my head as these points, especially when you get to that point when Diana touches the statue and she jumps back in time. And she jumps back to the old days, and she is now in her mother's, she is now in Antiope's body, and she is the sister now. And I was like, wait a minute, what just happened here?
Is it Antiope or Antiope?
I don't know.
No, and I'm just asking because I was trying to figure that out too, because I get stuck with that a lot of times with pronunciations, and I was just kind of thinking back how sometimes how vowel structure is presented in more of the ancient. And I could be completely off in my question on that one. It was interesting because it's such a pivotal character, Hippolyta's sister, and how it's brought into this one that I don't know. I don't know the history.
I actually, thinking about it, I would guess the I is pronounced with an E. Right. So Antiope.
Right. Like I was saying, that's what I've thought too. Especially with how Hippolyta is pronounced.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that whole sequence because she sees that face and goes, it's me. And all of a sudden, just by touching it, she's transported into that past history where she has these flashback visions of what actually happened and how they were betrayed by Heracles. The debate between the two sisters. And you get to see some of the flaws in Hippolyta in that sequence. To find out that parents are people that you put on this pedestal, right? Sometimes it's easy to forget that they're human and that sometimes that's not the whole story. So it was interesting to see some dark hours for Hippolyta and her sister, but also wondering, to the case in point of what you've been saying earlier, how much of this is true and how much of this is being put on Diana as a smear campaign. You don't know when you're first watching this through what this is that's happening here. And I really liked how you got to see sometimes how a dangerous love will cause somebody to betray those closest to them and then cause that person who they trusted, in the case in point with Heracles, to, later on you go, maybe this was such a bad idea.
Yeah, this was not a good idea there. And I loved, again, it was a really cool, going back to the flashback, seeing the two sisters debating and everything that played out, because, the stories that the stories that are, this is what's going on. No, it's not. That's not how things played out. And I loved how initially everything is kind of fitting towards what's already been laid out. That, Hippolyta and Heracles, and all this, everything that's kind of, so we haven't really completely flipped the script yet. We haven't changed anything in anyone's mind until, we get later on. But it was, again, neat, just dialogue, just going back and forth between the two of them. And I laughed because how it ends. Heracles betrays her and everything that happens, because that's just within the Amazon lore. But I kind of chuckled how she was just like, oh, everything's great. No, I already told him all the great secrets, and he loves me. He's not after what I have. No, not at all. I was just like, oh, she is just so kind of like she's just so childlike and innocent in that she's believing this guy. And again, that was something that really fed into my conspiracy theory, thinking that the person who is currently Hippolyta can't be this person, the person who's currently Hippolyta. So now I'm thinking her sister is actually Hippolyta. I'm thinking maybe they did a flip-flop switch along the way. So now I'm going through, as I continue reading this Wonder Woman stories, I'm thinking, okay, anytime it's Hippolyta, is it really Auntie? Is it Circe? Or is it Hippolyta? And I love the fact that I had this whole conspiracy theory going through my head, and and I didn't know if it was in back in the day they switched places, or whether it was a recent thing. Recently they switched places. If that whole Circe invasion was actually, a chance for her to take over again, or all that stuff. And I'm still going through my head how it played out, as I'm reading the story. But as I'm reading the story, I'm getting this images. I'm getting the story that I'm told. But then I also have the side story going into my head where I'm looking for the different conspiracies in this. And I tell you, that for me was, an enjoyment of a story that I can read it and not only get a cool story in front of me, but I'm getting these other side stories in my head going, man, what if it's this? I wonder if it's going to be that. Ooh, this could be kind of cool.
And TOP's revenge. I thought that too, that was kind of where it was going as well. I thought, actually, a lot of what you're saying, I'm just nodding, going, no, that was part of my journey as well. I thought it was Circe at one point. I thought it was Antiope at one point. And then, there was other parts of me that, like, it's just Hippolyta having a bad day, a bad decade, maybe a bad decade, I should say. The great part about this story was you very quickly get to know a lot about Hippolyta's sister by what befalls her. She's attacked and almost killed. But because of the fact that she sleeps on her sword, she ended up surviving that. But her first reaction immediately is to go after her sister. So we see a strength of character. It helps that she looks like Diana, because you can't help but rally behind her because of that. You see her kind of rushing in. I'm going after my sister, but no good deed goes unpunished, because that actually got her captured by Heracles. You had still, imagine that. You're like sitting here and your sister still at this point isn't standing behind you. Her sister's chained up to a column. And as we're going to find out in the next issue, she's still not quite on the side of her sister at this point. I think that would be enough for me. If my mate's like chained me up to a column and is about ready to kill my sibling, I'm going to have some questions about the quality of the relationship.
So that's where we differ. You're not a complete deal breaker for me.
Oh no,
we're not at the deal breaker point yet.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, everybody's got their limits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's it's what's healthy about this conversation. You're at least admitting that you have limits. The end of the issue. This was an interesting part that was missed. We saw Diana on the floor. Get help. I fear she's dead. With the blood piece there, because she's experiencing this same sequence of events. I kind of wanted to see the aftermath of this. You know what I'm saying? Like, we see her laying on the floor, and we never actually see that on screen.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of times where we have a couple, between the flashbacks and stuff like that, where there is some lag time. There is some missing time. And I get, and again, it was funny because they acknowledge like the missing time, like when we go on into 91, Diana, after seeing this vision, she takes off for some me time. She needs to focus on what she saw. And that kind of stuff would be kind of something I would have liked to have seen.
Yes.
But again, it's something that it's off camera. They do acknowledge that she was away for a little bit and that she was focusing on it. So it was one of those things where I was thinking in my head, did they show her in the Justice League then? This is something that they showed, in her, was she in another book dealing with something like that? And that was something that I was wondering what was going on.
No. It was,
I kind of figured that, but it was something kind of neat that it did have me, the story has me so into it that I was thinking that kind of stuff. I was thinking about, okay, what happened here? Did this happen? Did that happen? Is there something else I need to, read? Did I miss a piece of the story? One of those extra side stories or something like that?
This story couldn't be more dense either. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, there's like plenty of content here. So it's not like you're sitting here saying, geez, if they just added this in, it's like, where would you put it? So I don't have a problem with it. It was something when that was a cliffhanger where I'm like, wait, what happened? Because we never quite see how that plays out. We never see her get up and, be okay. When we're talking about artwork, we're talking about the wonderful interiors by Deodato Jr. And if I'm butchering his last name, I apologize because I'm really a fan of the art. And the whole art team, the colors of Patricia Mulvihill, and it just all came together. The covers, though, by the great Brian Boland. This series really enjoyed great covers by Brian. I mean, this arc, I should say, enjoyed some really great covers by Brian Boland. This has been a series, since Perez started it, has enjoyed some wonderful teams of art, some wonderful covers, wonderful interiors, and it really, for me, when I jumped on, I can't speak to every single run, but the runs that I jumped on with this, that was a hallmark. They really had some interesting talent working on writing and doing the artwork on this book. So Wonder Woman's really a character that, in this particular run, straight on through, enjoyed some top talent doing some unique things, trying to bring this character up to the same level of as Batman and Superman. And not that she shouldn't be, and I don't mean that as a negative. I just think it's one of those characters that I'm so glad to see her coming and launching into her own solo movie. Being that character that in Batman v Superman, wherever you fall, I have not found a single person yet that didn't like her. You know what I mean? So that part, I think, is something I have high hopes for the character. Maybe having a resurgence again, but hopefully surpassing what people have thought about the character. I'd like to see her be that top tier character again that people just know a little bit more about. And I hope that this type of stuff happens because these stories are wonderful. The artwork, the covers are fantastic. Because we see this. I'm looking at issue number 91 right now, and it's the cover with Artemis and Diana battling, and it's just a beautiful cover between the two. I really like that Brian Boland artwork there.
Oh God, yeah, and it was funny because you talk about the covers, and I did go back through and I was looking, when I was doing my read through, and it was fun. Something that I didn't notice initially, but I think is kind of neat. When Artemis is coming down with the staff and she's blocking it, she's breaking Diana's staff, and it was, it was something I don't know. I didn't really notice it the first time, but then you see and look through it, like, oh yeah, little wood chips flying, and it's, they're fighting on kind of there's some spiked wood around it. It's something it's some crazy type of battle arena, and I was like, oh, that's kind of neat.
Now this issue kicks off with Boston and seeing that there's a crime structure going on in Boston. Now, when I first read this years ago, I wasn't reading Wonder Woman at the time, so didn't quite understand where where I shouldn't say politics, where the crime lord structure was at this time. So you've got two crime lords, or one potential, I should say, crime lord, fighting for ownership and control in Boston. With the fact that Diana's right now on Themyscira, this has opened up an opportunity for the powers that be to take over and really battle each other. And what are they doing? They're trying to get their own little armies together in a world with metahumans to take control and seize control. Money is changing hands for the purpose of making and facilitating this type of thing happening. You know, it always, loyalties shift very quickly where finances are involved in this particular world. I really like that because you need to start getting up to speed at this point in time with where it's going to go after the contest. And this does a great job of giving a very short sequence that gives you enough background story that later is further reiterated in the issues as the story fills out. So that way, because here's what you don't want. You don't want people to see the end of the contest and jump ship. You want people at the end of the contest to see how Diana and Artemis are going to handle this, you know, what's coming up. So they're setting up future events in this. Again, it's the great part about having a writer and art team on a book where they can put together the next arc, where this story is going, while dealing with this major status quo change that they're currently in the process of doing in this story arc. It just feels like a big story because of that.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, Sazia, she seems like a really cool, you know, crime boss villain type of character. And again, this was the part of the story that I was like, what the heck's going on here? But I tell you, they laid it out really nicely for you so that I was able to get up to speed very quickly. And especially later issues where they keep bringing her back in, bringing back her crew, you know, bringing Paulie into the story, all the different people that are involved in this giant mob war, they bring them in nicely throughout it. So when it's the focus of the issues, you're not lost and confused.
And clearly, you know, she's somebody who married to advance herself and now has taken advantage of where her new power play is. I love seeing a strong female, both being a good guy and a bad guy, you know, in a story. And just seeing that she's smart, she's crafty, but she also exudes power, you know, and that's something that's really interesting when you do that with a female character, because it just looks a little different when you do it that way. And it's something this book has enjoyed, is great, strong female characters when they're done right, and you've got the right writers on board with it. And I think they're characters that I would love to see bleed over into more titles, to be, you know, adversaries in other books. You know, maybe when they're done with Diana and they escape, you know, they're done with prison or whatever, you know, their status quo is. You know, they set up shop in Gotham or Metropolis or something like that, just to shake up the status quo in those titles. Some crossover where villains are no longer a Wonder Woman villain. They become a Batman villain or a Superman villain or a Green Arrow villain or something like that. And they kind of stick in that area for a while. These type of people, like I could see her thriving in a Gotham because of its crime structure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she could do a pretty good job there.
And that kind of stuff I like.
Yeah, oh yeah, and I agree with you. And it was funny because after the initial thing, you see her, you know, there is a level of intelligence to her. There is a level of power that she's exuding, but it's not until later on that you really get, okay, she knows what she's doing. You know, because whenever you have the initial introduction of a character, you got to know, okay, is this somebody who knows what they're doing, or is this going to be somebody who's going to be able to get taken out? And with her, again, it was, you know, she had that confidence level to her immediately. So I was like, okay, you know, but you didn't really get to see later on what she can do. But when they really started making her the focus of the character, you can go back to this initial images and these initial thinkings that, okay, yeah, I think she can handle herself. And you're like, yeah, she definitely could. Okay. You know, and they laid a groundwork for future believability of her as this, the Queen of Boston.
I love the idea that a character who can fly would fly to get away. I mean, you know, think about how many times, you know, you kind of like go to a man cave or a office or whatever, you know, your own kind of spot to just have some quiet, you know, and relax, reflect, think, read, do whatever it is that you do to kind of like, you know, escape everything. But imagine you just kind of go, yeah, you know, I'm going to fly over here now. I mean, the kind of freedom of that and the sense of, I want to guarantee I get away from, I mean, you're flying away from phones. You're flying away from the internet. You're flying away from every possible distraction to just have some time to reflect. That kind of freedom is amazing. I love the majesty of that. It's one of the nice things about this. With all the combat in this story, there is a lot of beauty and majesty in it that comes from, the sequence with the birds and then her flying back in, and you're kind of sitting there going, that's cool. Like, I kind of, I wish I could do that. And again, this builds to, I have to change, this outfit to go be a part of the contest and head into this whole thing. Diana knowing that she's heading into something that just feels off. Something does not feel right about all this. She can't put her finger on it. She's making a lot of assumptions and things, using her own smarts. I'm glad we see her intelligence in all this, where she's feeling the same thing that we're feeling as a reader. Again, from a connectivity to your main lead character, that's handled brilliantly on this one, because I really felt like I understood her plight in this whole story from start to finish. I really found myself being reinvigorated as a Wonder Woman fan from this storyline. And this is no insult to John Byrne, but I found myself at the end of this particular arc wishing the writer had stayed on, just because I had become so connected to William Loebs' voice on Wonder Woman, just in the way he's handling this character. It did make me go back and get the previous issues just because I wanted to see more of that. And it's a wonderful run. I can't recommend the run before this. When Loebs kicks off on it, it's well worth reading the whole thing, because really understood the character. And it is, if you connected with the character this way, it's well worth going back and reading as much of it as you can, because it's really a terrific run.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. And I tell you, I love these sequences when they're coming in. And again, we talked about it earlier about how, it was Diana who, argued to get them in, and you could clearly tell this was part of Hippolyta's plan. Hippolyta wanted them in the contest. Hippolyta wanted it. And this was something that, it was a really nice goading of her daughter to get her in. And you see just that kind of smile. And even on Diana's face, when she's like, Mother? She's kind of like surprised, like, wait a minute, I just got played. And that I thought was a really cool, the fact that, Diana's recognizing something is off here. And I thought, again, little subtle stuff throughout this, where this was a really cool just play and a really good ruse. And again, completely added, again, this was something that further added to my thinking that it was Antiope's people. Hippolyta wasn't, it was was actually was pretending to be Hippolyta. And I was like, oh man. And again, it kept going with the conspiracy in my head. And I was so happy that the story that they continue, it had that same consistency throughout it, that we have this theme that the Hippolyta's hiding something isn't completely on the up and up, and they keep adding to that feeling.
Yeah, and the political play of, I want them in it, but I can't look like I want them in it because I'm going to look bad. Was absolutely brilliant in this, because you could tell by how quickly she's like, you're right, we need to vote. Let's vote. Yeah. Nice speech. Very well. All in favor of permitting the Amazons of Antiope to enter into this contest. Raise your right hand. Everyone's hands up. Obviously, I've been overruled.
Don't throw me in the briar patch. Not the briar patch.
Just great stuff. I loved seeing the contest played out. This is something that I would have loved to have seen in. You remember that Wonder Woman animated, the movie that DC put out, the one we talked about on the show. I really loved that one because you got to see so much of this kind of stuff. I am hoping to see this live action, this kind of stuff, live action in the Wonder Woman movie that's coming. I hope they do the origin and do it justice, because I love this whole idea of the contest. What she did for Mala in this sequence with the javelins was deliberate, and you see her smiling there and encouraging her sister. I love that Mala knows it in her heart and is that much more, loves Diana that much more because of the fact that Diana was willing to do that. And I love that kind of stuff. I just think it's really a great choice in developing characters to have the kinds of stories where you're looking and reading them and going, oh, wow, Diana's really just a good person. You want to believe that about Wonder Woman. Her compassion is something that I think if you lose that in the comics with her, it's the depth of the character that I find so interesting. She doesn't lose any strengths by being compassionate. That comes from confidence. I think you can be compassionate with people and not be weak. Because she's called on it later by Artemis. And I love that I felt like I could defend Diana to Artemis. Because Artemis calls her on that and tells her that's her weakness. and Diana comes back. You know, I mean, Diana doesn't even come back with anything. You just kind of are sitting there going, no, her actions kind of defend her on this one, Artemis. Yeah. You're in the wrong. You know, and I really loved that I felt that way, if I'm making any sense.
Oh, big time. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And as you're talking, I'm nodding my head because, again, that's some of the great stuff that is Diana and is Wonder Woman, that she does stuff like that she inspires people and that she brings out the best in you, you know, in this contest. In the middle of this whole contest, she's still there with her friend. She's still there helping her out. And I thought that was a really cool moment, but also just right along with all this really neat action. Again, non-traditional panels overlapping each other, using just to show time and speed and power. And I thought, you know, a flat page, you know, really was giving us a lot of dynamics, you know, to it. And again, this is one of those things that I can sit here and stare at some of this stuff for a while and say, man, this is some really cool artwork. This is some neat stuff that they're doing with, you know, simple pages of throwing javelins and running, you know, and just, you know, they show, again, fluidness and just the you know, a visual movement of action on a stagnant page. I was like, man, that's some cool stuff. And again, a great way to bring out the contest through multiple pages, you know, and this could have very easily been a full issue on just the contest, but they shrunk it down to just a couple pages, you know, and I never felt cheated. I never felt like, I wish I would have seen more. No, they showed us some really cool action, showed us that Diana really knows how to throw down and can really fight well. You know, you got to see their skills.
You know what your point is well met, because you know what, there's not one way to have great pacing, and you're talking about pacing and everything you're saying, and I'm just this is one of those sequences where I'm just like listening to everything you're saying. I'm like, nah, Jim's right. That really is what works about this. Is just it's terrific pacing throughout this whole thing that I think has really made this story a lot of fun to read. You're right. You could have extended that the whole issue. It would have worked. In some ways, I can't help but wonder if that would have been cheap. You know, I mean, because I think the drama of this was seeing some really well-developed pages of the contest, but then it's those moments afterwards as the scores are being posted and they're sitting down together, comrades in arms. You see the two camps. And Diana's trying to extend the olive branch and say, look, you know, you did great today. And, you know, come sit with us. Let's talk about this. Because that's what they do as a people. You know, as you sit down afterwards and tell stories of what happened on the field and joke about it. And it's fun. I mean, for them, that's fun. This is like running a really brutal rope course. You know, I mean, and, that part is real interesting afterwards. But she comes back with, you think one pretty speech is going to change everything between us? It isn't. This is years, a lifetime of humiliation, and it doesn't just go away. You see that Artemis softens at certain times when they're walking together one-on-one and having a conversation, but even more so when they're in a group, especially a group of Diana's sisters. Artemis needs to posture. Yeah. And I've noticed that part when Artemis is in her home and it's her people surrounding her, she's actually kinder to Diana. It's when the other Amazons are with Diana that Artemis postures more. And it was interesting to see that distinction throughout the story. And I really liked that choice because I think the duality of the situations is honest. It's real. I think it's the way things work in real life. It also made me feel that Artemis was three-dimensional and a character I wanted to follow more. And you have to establish that pretty quickly in this one. And I think that establishment was great, losing nothing of Diana in the sequence. You didn't have to bring down Diana to promote Artemis as an interesting character.
I know. And it was one of those sequences where it really, you know, raised up both characters because It's showing Diana once again, you know, extending the peace, trying to make peace, and once again is rejected, but she doesn't let it stop her. You know, and then it shows Artemis as the strong character. You know, so it was a really neat stuff, and I loved how at the very bottom of that you see Malak celebrating, "Yay, I made it to the second round," and the other's like, "We are also." And it was kind of a nice contradiction there. It shows they're more, you know, rigid, more serious on this, whereas Mala's like, "Yay, this is a really fun thing," and it's something that you see later on through the contest, through the end of the contest, how they each approach the way it went through, you know, especially because, you know, when they're sitting around like the campfire, you know, and again, two different camps sitting around the campfire. this jaw jacking, talking about the day's events. But you want to see Hippolyta and them work together. You want to see them kind of be part of, see them be part of a group. And even Artemis, as we're sitting around the campfire, is like, maybe this contest may change that. And initially when I first read through it, I was thinking, okay, she's thinking I could become Wonder Woman, I take over, yada, yada. But it wasn't about her taking over. It wasn't about her people being on top. It was about, an acceptance. It was about an equality. And I think that for me was a cool thing that first read-throughs, I'm thinking one thing, but second read-throughs, oh no, she's looking more at the overall picture, looking more at getting her people out of the desolate desert and back with their group, back, a better life for her people, maybe a unity among the Amazons. And I thought that for me was a kind of a neat thing, especially the fact that when the first plans of invasion were happening, Artemis stood alone against the plan. At the age of 14, she was like, she stood against the queen and the council, and her argument was Amazons shouldn't war against another one. And I thought that for me, that fire sequence was a really cool moment for an Artemis story, a really cool moment where it gets you into the, man, she's all right there. She's a little jaded and she's a little angry, but kind of justifiable. I think we got a making of a cool Wonder Woman here.
Not only equals, in some ways, not only are we equals, but we're better. And I really liked that was kind of a theme of this as well. We've got every bit of the skills that they do. And, if we win, we may be seen as better. You're right. I don't think she had designs on being Wonder Woman. I think maybe that could have been a part of it, but she really more stands her own ground and wants respect, justification. In some ways, this is a journey of her finding her way too.
Yeah.
And I really, really loved that part of this story. I felt like I was going on a journey with Artemis, and I really, really liked the journey that I was going on. I found like what's her motivation? What's driving her? Things like that. And the more I got to know about that, the more I found this story far more interesting.
Yeah, this is definitely a solid Artemis story as well as a Diana story. And I think that for me was something that I didn't realize going into this. I didn't realize how much of a cool story on Artemis, who Artemis is, that she could have carried on that mantle for a while. She could have, been Wonder Woman for a while. And I think that would have been a kind of as equally a neat story to do, where give her a little bit of a run as Wonder Woman. But it's because they're laying such a solid groundwork on who she is and what she's about that I'm thinking that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Amen. I totally agree. So Diana flips back into the sequence again. I found these flashbacks, it's kind of like, what do I like about Arrow? I like sometimes the flashback sequences as much as what's going on in present day. This has got that kind of vibe to it where, I want to know what's going on with Antiope. And we see Antiope go against Heracles. I kept thinking Antiope was going to die. I really did. I'm like, okay, this is it. This is where we're going to see her die. What is this sequence happening? And as that battle continues, I felt like it was a ticking clock. You're waiting for, when is the sequence? What are we going to see her die? What's going to happen there? Diana flipping in and out of those sequences I found incredibly interesting. I wonder why, because she doesn't appear to vanish there. She fainted.
Right.
And, we saw in the earlier sequence that she seemed to have vanished. So that part, anytime you're dealing with kind of magic and the magic of Themyscira, it does kind of make the whole thing.
Yeah, because she was there the whole time, because they talk about when she ends up coming back, she was talking, and they could hear her, and she was kind of like in and out of consciousness.
Yes. Yeah, that was exactly the case of the whole thing. And I really liked how that story played out, that it wasn't, you could have told that in its own issue if you wanted to. Revealing it as little flashbacks like this, I think, worked so much better, because you want it kind of blended in with the present day, and it did give it much more of a mystery feel that I think was what they were going for. And I found that far more engaging in reading the mystery than if they just spelled it all out for me right from the get-go.
Oh, yeah. And I tell you, again, just talking about how I liked how it was triggered every time something event happens in the world that triggers Diana to go back, and it was just a constant, the back and forth nature of it. And it was, a couple times like, oh, that's bad timing on the flashback, and again, it was kind of a neat story element.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree with you. So we got Diana and Hippolyta talking. And not Diana, Hippolyta's laying out the next stage of the contest, I should be saying. And the next stage of the contest, it's kicking up the contest to something it never was. She's setting them up to be in little parties to war against each other. It's really showing a different sort of stake with this. And a lot of this is she's setting up what happened during their time they were in the demon world. And that was the part where I'm like, oh, so this has affected Hippolyta this way, that she feels that now maybe it's set Hippolyta on a mindset where her idea of what a truly strong Amazon needs to be was influenced by the hardships they went through there and the amount of loss they went through there. So these contests a lot of times are a tribute to previous battles that the Amazons have fought. In this case, Hippolyta's upped the games. But not only did she up the game on that level, we see behind the scenes that Hippolyta's done something really sneaky and lethal to this, which this really made me think the same thing you were thinking earlier. Who is she really? This isn't Hippolyta, because she's setting up these people to die in this particular sequence and how it plays out by opening up these portals that these beasts are going to come through, including a Gorgon come through, to attack the people during the contest. The stakes couldn't be much higher, and it did really make me question her on a very deep level.
Oh God, yeah, and I love this with this team dynamics and the team fighting. Again, it showed Diana acting as the peacekeeper when there was between Artemis, and just the group was falling apart. But you get into this great ambush and the great strategy that they're laying out, and I loved how and it's not even just on Diana's side, but on both sides, because initially they sent Mala out there to be the bait, and then when they attack, the attacking forces held some back in reserve just in case. And I loved how both of them, each team used, were actually, it wasn't just a complete wild attack. No, each one was laying out what they knew what they were doing. These are two warrior groups fighting each other, but even as the fight is laying out, you still see kind of like, when the two of the traditional Amazons are fighting, there's more of a surrender, kind of thing. But you get some pretty serious violence going on, some really good skills that, all of them know how to fight. And I thought that, again, a couple panels of fighting between them really showed some really cool stuff going on.
Yeah. One of the cool things about that whole sequence was during the fight, you see an arrow drawn on Diana. And Diana's, fighting one faction versus the other. The arrow's drawn on her and goes to be fired. You really see through the combat why Artemis would be the one to save her.
Yeah.
Because Artemis, I don't want to say change. Yeah, she evolves throughout this. I think she starts to come into her own and starts to develop a code, so to speak, as far as who she is, how she's going to react, how she views what should and shouldn't be done, what her goals and motivation are. She wants respect for her people. She wants apologies for the harm and humiliation that's been done to her people. She really wants them to be viewed as every bit as good as the Amazons, in many ways better, because of the fact that the Amazons so dismissed them, which says in her mind a lot about their character that they would allow such a thing to happen to them. But also she wants to poke through Hippolyta's lies about her people. It's such an interesting motivation.
Oh God, yeah, and that was a cool sequence where the end of 91, beginning of 92, with the arrow attack on Diana. Because end of 91 they show left-handed draw, so immediately I'm thinking, oh, okay, Artemis, and then beginning of 92 you see Artemis save the day, and you see Artemis jump in the path. But something that I didn't notice until I did my second read through was Diana's fighting a member of Auntie's, Amazons. Not one of Hippolyta's. And, that Amazon is yelling, Diana, look out. that Amazon is giving Diana the heads up. I thought that for me was something I noticed. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool that one of these people who should hate her, who should, think, is kind of coming around towards Diana, is kind of coming around towards this. I thought for me, that was a kind of another cool moment where not only was it Artemis who saves her, and we later learn why she saves her, but it was one of Artemis's crew also giving her the heads up. I thought that, again, it's the bringing of the two families together. And I was happy to see that.
The other thing it shows too, though, is I don't know that person wouldn't have always said that. And let me explain why. What it shows us is that just because they're a different faction doesn't mean they're bad people. Just because they've been, they were brainwashed and wound up going with Cersei doesn't mean that all of them were bad people. Doesn't mean that a majority of them are bad people. And doesn't mean that during that 10 years, the people that are now, leadership material in that group or, some of your heavy hitters in that group are bad people. The complexities of that, the gray areas of that are far more interesting when you kind of look at it and go, oh, well, just because we know a lot more about Diana's Amazons doesn't mean that others aren't the same quality or caliber. I really like that depth to the story.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. And again, it's, a simplistic way of saying is you can't judge a book by its cover, yep. Yada, yada, all those kind of just understanding and equality of people. You got to look at the individual, not as a whole. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but it was something that I really liked how they laid it out in the story. Uh-huh. I liked how they get you thinking this, they get you noticing these subtle stuff, and they get you seeing, like, especially I liked how after Artemis saves the day, Diana's reached out, gives her the hand, helps her up. Later on, we're also going to see Artemis help out Diana again and help out Mala. You see, just again, it's a slow growth, a slow build of who these people are. And I thought, this was a great way to do this, and this was a great way to actually show, show a unity of them.
The interesting part was when we then flesh over to Boston, and we see the mob war continuing. This time, Sazia is basically the one with a hit squad around her. And she's like, he sent us to tell you that, to mess you up, and then to kill you. You got any final words? Yep. You have 1 minute to surrender, or you can choose to join me. That part was that confidence when you've got 3 surrounding your bed. We've got at least 3 guns in play that we're seeing there. I'm assuming the other guy has at least 1 or 2 on there. Yet that complete confidence. She looks vulnerable at the start of it and completely switches over to... okay, you want to talk this out? That's fine. Let's do that. Meet Moot and Jeff. Jeff is a biomechanical construct stolen from Star Labs. He's programmed for ferocity and loyalty. Moot is very unstable. Now who wants to join? Oh, that would be me. Me too. I like female bosses.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. And again, you got to love, just again, confident. Just she's sitting there. She's got a gun to her head, and she's not even batting an eye because she knows. And it was I chuckled, when he first showed up. I'm thinking, oh God, I was thinking initially all 3 of them were dead, but I'm like, you knew at least one of them was going to be dead. And then the guy, hey, that's funny, really. It's time to die. There's a long, sharp thing coming out of my chest. So there is. I chuckled. I have to admit, there's just something about when you get these guys who are all pumped up saying, I'm a killer, and then they just drop dead. Like, okay, next.
I'm assuming Moot's the one on the left, the one with the point.
Yeah.
Moot point.
Oh.
I wonder how much of that was deliberate.
I wonder.
I guess I'm just assuming Jeff is the guy on the right. I could be wrong, but...
I was thinking Moot because Moot's very unstable, and he's the guy who's going, hi!
Yeah,
he's got the goofy grin on his face.
Yes, I would totally agree with you on that one. I was thinking
but I do like Moot Point.
I do too. The whole sequence was funny, but yet dangerous. Yeah. And that's a great way to use humor in a book like this with that. So we go back to the contest, and we get to see the contest start to play out. Artemis having that confrontation with her. Patrice, can I speak to you for a minute? And her basically saying, listen, you are undoing everything that I'm doing here. Diana overhearing that and playing out, knowing, first of all, who attacked her, but Artemis's stand. And just kind of realizing that she's starting to make some assumptions about Artemis and Artemis's strength of character, and getting that validation that, oh yeah, I'm right. You know, Artemis is cool. She's somebody I got to keep an eye on, and has a lot of potential here. I really loved that, just because that felt very natural.
Oh God, yeah. And again, it was kind of a neat point. You know, again, further accentuating who Artemis is, but also kind of I was glad to see Diana knew what had happened and knew she could trust Artemis.
Also seeing Diana's ability to kind of follow people along, do some stealth.
Yeah.
You know, it's anything that adds a little bit more depth to what you knew about Diana and her capabilities, I find very interesting. Especially the fact, again, Diana has no powers right now, but yet she's coming from a point of strength because this is who she is. She's trained her whole life to be who she is. And just seeing her play out, you know, in that whole sequence is something that I really liked. You know, I often wondered, it'd be like, you know, they're immortal, I guess, when they're on the island, right? And they lose their immortality when they leave the island. So if you go to vacation there, do you get like a week extra? You know, I mean, it was kind of an interesting part about that whole island and the whole, is that like a light switch? Does it turn on and off? Or is it once you leave, you're kind of done?
Well, once you leave, you stop, you know, while you're there, you stop aging. Mm-hmm. So once you leave, you start back up again.
So, but here's my point though. If you're there, let's say that I fly back there and I live there now. Does that mean I'm going to be immortal for the rest of my life at this age?
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be the same thing for her, right?
Yeah, should be.
Yeah.
Because that's what you think about it. When they first did the initial invasion, they said she was 14. They lived 10 years in the demon world, so now she's 24. Now that it's back in the world, she's once again immortal.
Ah, got it, yeah.
Because that was one of the arguments they made in one of the earlier issues about how they had to fight for their birthright of immortality.
So she's immortal at 24 then?
Yeah, she's immortal now at this age.
Right. As long as she stays.
As long as she stays. Well, here I'm wondering how much of that is as long as they stay. I thought, you know, once you had the touch, you're good to go, but I don't know anymore. Because Diana leaves constantly and she's not aging, but she's also, you know, Diana. I don't know if the Amazons, if they leave, if they age.
Well, Diana's an Amazon in this, though.
Right.
And they referenced the fact in the original contest that she was giving up her immortality in the Zero issue.
Well, she gives up her powers when she's there.
No. They referenced when she agreed, whoever the winner of the contest is going as an Amazon representative in a man's world and gives up their immortality.
Oh, okay.
When they leave the island.
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
They actually referenced that in the contest. That was the original contest in the Zero issue when they were going through the cycle of that was part of what Diana was signing up for. Imagine that going, hey, you're immortal if you stay here. If you don this outfit and go out to represent us, you're going to die at some point. You're going to get old and die. Not that you don't die if you're an Amazon, but, you know, I don't know. Your odds are a whole lot better if you stay on that island.
Yeah, see, that's a tough call. You know, honestly, you know, all kidding aside, that is a tough thing to get rid of.
Oh, yeah.
Would you want to leave this world? And even just, not even just the immortality stuff, they got a pretty cool life there. You know, part of me wouldn't mind living there and just living that level of peace and just that harmony they have, you know, get away from the world. But again, it's, you know, there is a whole, is it the grass is greener on the other side kind of thing. So I don't know. Every situation in life has its ups and downs. It's kind of like, you know, with jobs. You and I we have you know, different jobs, and we have similar things. And there's certain things about, you know, with your job with, you know, teaching and all that you have these great benefits. There's stuff that I have in my job that's got great benefits. So I could sit there and say, oh, it'd be awesome to be a teacher because of blah, blah, blah. And you could say, oh, it'd be awesome, you know, being in banking because of blah, blah, blah. And it's that kind of looking at it the same thing where it'd be awesome to be immortal living on this island, but you are also giving up stuff. You're not connected with the world. They don't have the World Wide Web out there. They don't have cable TV. They don't have, you know, just regular advancements that we have, simple things like a cell phone, or they don't have that kind of stuff. And it was kind of brought up when Diana was looking at the pottery, and she was kind of bored looking at the pottery because she's got so much stuff going on in the other world, that this isn't just the simplistic of watching the pottery, or every single day that one person always went down and got the water and did, she was the water carrier. This was what she did. That kind of stuff is okay there, but could you and would you want to live all of eternity like that? I don't know.
I agree. It makes for an interesting part of the story, trying to figure out the ins and outs of that, which is quite a bit of fun. So the storyline continues, and we've got the debate between Hippolyta and, was it
Philippius.
Philippius? Yeah, Philippius was, Philippius is one of those characters that does continue to reoccur later on. And we actually I believe we see Philippius in present day New 52,
yes.
Don't we? Isn't she the one that we're currently seeing as Diana's confidant every so often?
I think so.
Okay. So Philippius is a pretty important character. She's stuck with this fact that she knows what the danger that they're going into, tries to warn them, but only says so much. Her loyalty to Hippolyta kind of matching up with her own ethics. I really enjoyed that, like seeing that inner struggle that she had.
Yeah, and again, that was a sequence again, further just cemented in the fact in my head that was Cersei. Because she's saying how there's some ancient magic still left that I'm able to access. I'm like, that ain't ancient magic. That's Cersei magic. This has got to be Cersei. And so it was one of those where I'm flashing back and forth, going through the different stories, the different possibilities. And again, that was another thing that further cemented that it had to be Cersei. And I love how that she did kind of give them the warning. And it was because she made that comment to Diana that later on, Diana walks into the whirlpool. Yeah, that was the first one. But that second, third, she's starting to see, these other dangers. And she was ready for the other dangers because of that warning. I thought that was kind of a neat thing on all parts to do.
Mala almost dying in the whirlpool, and Artemis being the one to save her. Again, showing us that there's more than we know about Artemis. Flips Diana into, as she's trying to escape, she has now another flashback. And we get to see that Hippolyta did, in fact, step up to save her sister. So now I'm starting to... This was the point in time where I'm like, oh, this really did happen. Because, by her stepping in to save her sister, you're kind of like, okay, I guess there is a point of this story where you can start to forgive Hippolyta. But it does set up a turn of events where Antiope is the one actually that goes to start freeing the Amazons. Yeah. It wasn't Hippolyta. She passes that torch over to Hippolyta, so people think it was her that actually turned on Heracles and did all that. Antiope tossed a solid to Hippolyta because she said, listen, you're the only one that can do this. I am not cut out for the role that you need to take in this one. So we are going to make it seem like it was you. And there's a reason why we're going to make it seem like it was you. Here's what you're going to do because of this. I loved every single bit of that because that felt very, very real to me.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. And again, it was funny because that was the sequence that kind of cleared the anti-Hippolyta thing for me. I'm like, okay, it's definitely not Hippolyta. It's definitely not anti pretending to be Hippolyta or any of that stuff. But I still was lock solid that it was Cersei. And I thought that was a cool thing where it was kind of neat that it was Diana's face of her sister. And I don't know if it's because of this. When you start dealing with the time travel and time streams, did Diana jumping back in time now affect how she looked, or was it always that way, or did Hippolyta craft the baby because of the baby out of clay because of what Auntie did for Hippolyta? What was the cause of the effect? Was it the chicken or the egg? Which came first? And I thought that was something that was kind of neat, seeing Auntie did all that stuff for the Amazons. All this strength that everyone attributes to Hippolyta actually was her sister. And I thought that for me was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
You're leaving. I must, Polly. I can honor you as my queen, and I can love you as my sister, but I can never trust you again. that divide is pretty pivotal there, because you see the divide from the Amazons are driven from the same problem. Hippolyta can't be trusted. And that sets up this premise that for as much as Hippolyta's smart and can be a good leader at certain times, she can't be trusted. And we actually see that being put out in this storyline. Very interesting. And it does put that into question. It's almost like when you see that memory shattering away, it's like pieces of Diana's love for her mother and trust of her mother are shattering as well.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that was just a really well done sequence of events.
Oh God, yeah. And again, it's I loved how in the middle of this race you do see Artemis. It looks like Artemis to me saved not only Mala, but it also saved Diana, because she's right there. When Diana flashes back from her sequence, and she's right there helping her up, saying, "Okay, you're not dead. Back to the race," and she starts running.
I agree. So it's there's a code of honor with Artemis that I really like. She's got a warrior's code.
Yep.
And I think we see her really as a strong warrior throughout this whole thing. I love the warrior's code bit with her. Then the Harpies come in. You don't really have a lot of time to have reaction on this one. I love the battle with the Harpies, because really what it sets up right now is Diana being in a situation where she's getting worn out. We have to remember, she isn't Wonder Woman strong right now. She's an Amazon, just like everybody else there. She's strong, she's powerful, she's a fighter, but there comes limits for all of that. I do like that Artemis's conversation had an effect on her fellow Amazon, where she helped save Diana in that sequence, kind of going, all right, you know what? I was listening. It shows Artemis's strength as a leader.
Yep.
And this bringing of the two Amazon tribes together for this contest is just something that I found that was really incredibly interesting for the whole thing. The drama was a lot of fun. Good.
Yeah, well, yeah, just the arrow for arrow, the code again. It's that whole and not only that, but Patrice also had that same code that Artemis has, and again, I like seeing that. But also, just it was one of those things where you're sitting there going, okay, this is who Diana is. She's the warrior. She's fighting, but then she goes and she frees her friend Mala. Now there was really no more threat to Mala. She maybe could have figured her own way out of it, but still, Diana still had to do that. Diana still had to be that friend and take care of her friend. And I thought, again, neat stuff that happens with who Diana is.
Now here's the period where Diana lost the contest, the fight with Medusa.
Oh yeah, because I think it was a combination of everything, because
but here's the thing: if she hadn't fought Medusa and just ran, she would have won.
Yeah, true, because everybody else was turned to stone already.
Artemis was turned to stone. Artemis looked.
Yeah.
So by choosing to do the right thing and to fight and take down Medusa, Artemis got free. Artemis got a head start the second that happened. The second she was released, she kept running. So that kickoff and that lead that Artemis gained was directly impacted by the fact that Diana was fighting during that battle. And
because Diana's down half a cliff. She had to climb up the cliff.
Right. So that whole sequence was right away. And you see, when you turn the next page, Artemis is in the lead. Artemis kicked off that run during that situation with Diana. And Diana still almost came in and won. What I love about that, here's what I like. You and I are both big wrestling fans, right? And how there's times where you put two really great wrestlers in the ring together, and the question becomes, how do you pump up one without taking down the other, if they're both high up on the food chain and you want to keep them, over with the fans? The way to do that is in sequences like this, where you've got this sense of it's a really close battle. And there's also a sequence where that beatdown or that, particular sequence is what made the other one able to best this person, when otherwise everything might have been equal and it may not have gone that way. That part I found very, very interesting in this. I do like that Artemis saved Diana and Diana saved Artemis. So going on saving face, Artemis doesn't look like a bad guy in this one. Diana doesn't look like a bad guy in this one. Both of them rescued each other. The contest in itself was flawed by the fact that somebody could have died during this forced the Amazons on both sides to choose to rescue each other, which immediately brings the contest in question. How do you win when the other person was tied up with something that could have been potentially lethal to others that they were rescuing. Diana, by saving 2 others, lost the contest.
Right. And it was funny because I can't think of what her name was, Vanilla.
Yeah.
She was way ahead of everybody because she was the one who could really swim well. So when they had that first water thing, she avoided the whirlpool because she was so much faster than everybody else. But she got caught by Medusa because she was going up and there wasn't any threats, and bam, or the Gorgon or Medusa or whatever you want to call her, bam, she dropped and she was turned to stone initially. So she was way ahead of everybody. If this had been a straightforward contest, maybe she would have won the contest because I don't know if anybody could have caught up to her on a straight foot run.
Right. So then from this one, at the end, you see that she won and Artemis is the new Wonder Woman forever, which leads us to issue number 93. I love this cover because it was the first time you really got to see Artemis as Wonder Woman, but you also got to see Diana in what's going to be her new costume because, the question becomes, what becomes of Diana if Artemis is Wonder Woman? And this story did something unique with that one, that it kept both of them operating in man's world. In the way that it worked. And let's talk a little bit about how that came about and how do we feel about that. The issue addresses one real problem in the very beginning. Artemis doesn't have the natural powers that Diana does. So how is Artemis going to fly? How is Artemis going to be strong? How is she going to go to man's world to appear as Wonder Woman? Well, we have these bracelets of
Atlas, the gauntlets of Atlas.
Gauntlets of Atlas, and the sandals of Lord Hermes in order to give her speed and flight. Those are giving her the little edge. I really liked that they established that right in the beginning, that this has to be different for Artemis because of the nature of Artemis's background.
Yeah, and it was kind of neat where they're presenting this, but also there was a cool moment of where she's like, Hermes, a god left you his sandals, and Artemis didn't know that. It's like, I've never heard that story. And you see Diana in the background going, neither have I. And again, this was further this must be Circe. That's how she got it, And it was kind of neat that, they quickly explain this, and it furthers my conspiracy theory, but also furthers the story that there's something else going on here. Because immediately Hippolyta's like, "Oh, you've proven yourself. I accept you with my heart as a sister and a daughter." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a nice little jab in the heart there against Diana. Let's just twist the knife there." And I was like, "Man, that is cool. That is a cool opening where it could be it's a very subtle thing." But it still furthers this really neat adventure and really neat exploration of who is the new Wonder Woman.
Also, we start to learn Hippolyta's motivation here. Part of what Hippolyta's motivated by is by keeping Diana on the island, so that way she can groom Diana to eventually be the queen.
Yeah.
And to really get her back in the groove of, like, this is what I originally wanted when you originally pulled your scheme. Now this is a chance for me to kind of set you back on the path that I always had laid out for you. So it's an interesting way that plays out, and it starts to make more sense of that one. I loved seeing Artemis's joy at being able to fly.
Yeah, that was a kind of neat thing that she immediately just jumped to the sky. She was like, yes, I can fly. And again, if you or I had actually gotten, the ability to flight, we would have done something stupid like that. We would have jumped off immediately and gone, yes, cool.
Oh, 100% agree. That would have been exactly what I would have done. So then Diana reveals the fact that, hey, I know what happened with Antiope. And through the way that she presents it to Hippolyta, she realizes the whole story was true. She gently reveals that line that Antiope said at the end. And the way Hippolyta reacted just verified the only way you would react that way is if you were in fact there and you knew in fact what happened. So it just validates everything, causing Diana to go, I'm done. Fine. You think I'm staying here? No, I'm gone. I'm done. I'm going back home, back to my people. Fine. You got what you wanted. But in the end, you lost still, because I'm still going to go be who I am. That part was really great. It's not the mantle that makes Diana who she is. It's who she is that made her the Wonder Woman that she was. And I think that's always important in these explorations, is these are a great way, by giving that mantle to somebody else like Artemis, you show that it's not it's not that outfit that made Diana Wonder Woman. It's who she is. And we see that in this story arc. Really, really an exciting part of all this is the two of them are flying off together.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a neat thing where initially, I liked how she's like, "You flying lunatic? Look, what's wrong?" And you kind of see that, she can see just how angry and how just fired up Diane is, and Diane is just on her way. And I thought that was kind of another cool moment of, again, Artemis going, "Hey, what's up here?" And you start seeing kind of a somewhat of a, what that kind of somewhat friendship or bonding they started to have. It continued where she's recognizing something ain't right here.
So we see in Boston, Artemis fly in for the first time to be the Wonder Woman that starts to save everything. And it's kind of cool that people go like, who is that? And the fact that she's still carrying around her bow. I mean, this is going to be a very different Wonder Woman in her presentation. This is not going to be somebody who handles things the same way as Diana because she's not the same upbringing. And what she's used to and how she's used to being and representing her people is going to be very different than Diana. I really liked that. I liked seeing that from the beginning because you don't want her to all of a sudden go, I'm going to try and be Diana. She didn't. She was her own Wonder Woman. And I really quite enjoyed these issues with Artemis as Wonder Woman because of the fact that she wasn't trying to be Diana and we still had Diana.
Yeah. And, and this opening where she's jumping right into the gang war, she's busting it up and she's doing some pretty good throwdowns with these, powerful, tech beings / magic and just being herself. And, she's throwing down, then Diana shows up and you kind of get a really cool tag team going. And initially I'm thinking, are we going to keep getting these two fighting together? Are we going to, or are they going to split up? Or is there going to be something? Because, I did wonder how this was going to play out because I really like the fact that we never lost Diana throughout all this. I really like the fact that we got Artemis being Artemis and actually showing us what she could have done as Wonder Woman and who she was and who she was about. So I think this was a great way to actually tell this kind of story. I think back to with Asbats, where when Bruce got his back broken, and you did get some cool stories of Bruce Wayne coming back, but initially we just had Azrael. We just had really just Asbats, out there, and we just had him doing his thing. And, this is a different way of handling it where we never lose the one hero. We always keep her in play. And that was kind of a neat way to handle this. And if they had lessened Artemis's growth, if they had lessened, who she was leading up to this, it could have made her less of a character. But because they went through so much to develop who Artemis is, she's okay to share. She's able to share screen time with Diana.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's part of the thing that's really cool is the screen time that she shared. I like that they all had their own story. They both had their own story going on, but there was natural convergence because of the fact they're in the same city. When Diana comes crashing down with that wham, I loved that. I thought it was just a great visual of her coming in and kicking and reminding us, it's a Wonder Woman, man. Bam!
Yeah, she can throw down.
So we jump back into this sequence where, after the battle, you see, well, you certainly took your time there, little princess. Kind of the argument between the two of them. Not really an argument, but kind of a friendly banter is probably a better way to put it. Artemis always has an edge to her. And that's really what I like about her, is her edge. Sometimes you can put an edge on somebody and they're almost unlikable. I kind of equate her as a lighter version of Damian, because Damian early on was kind of hard to like, and then you grew to like him. Artemis early on, I liked her almost from the beginning, which is an interesting, even though she has an edge to her, you understood her edge because of circumstance. So argument's not really the right word for it. Edge. She has an edge. And that part is something that I really like about seeing the two of them. There is, to your point, I would have loved to see a buddy book with Diana and Artemis. Just kind of keep going on.
They could have kept this running for a little bit.
That's what I really liked about it was I liked these two as a team. That part was something that really struck me. There was a story reason why Diana would come back and adopt a new role. There is a story reason why Artemis would be there in the role as Wonder Woman. And the two of them were different enough that it made sense that they were both there. you got something out of both of them. And there was still a continuation of the Strong Diana story that was going on in the midst of what was going on with Artemis. It was an interesting status quo change. Back in the hospital, you get to see Julia. Now, Julia, I don't know if you remember her from when we started reading the George Perez run, but Julia and Nessie were characters that did stay on. Julia and her daughter did stay on through the entire run. And it was nice to see these characters come back because she was the one when Diana was coming to man's world, gave her some guidance, became kind of like this friend and mentor and helped her kind of adjust to living in this world. Diana's loyalties to these people, at this point, you're talking about you're almost 100 issues in, and you've still got these characters involved. And they are people that are important to Diana. I really liked that.
Yeah. This was another one of those sequences that I was a little bit confused as to who they were. I had no memory of her at all or any of them. And when they threw out the Edda, I knew Edda, but I had no idea who Donna or Nessie or any of those people were. So, but it was again, the way the story is crafted, I wasn't lost for long, and you got to see why Diana needs money. You got to see Diana going through a change where before she wasn't going to use her powers to make money because of the code of the Amazon. Well, now the code of the Amazon's a little bit tainted because of what her mother did, what the lies that happened. And she's like, hey, you know what? I'm in the world of man now. I got to follow some man rules. And I liked how the fact that we got to see Diana make some changes in her life, but she doesn't completely give up who she is, but she still recognizes what you need. And these sequences, especially and later on, these sequences will even play out even more towards who and what's going on here that I was kind of happy with. But again, these were kind of stuff that I'm catching at the end of another story. This is the prologue, the epilogue to a previous story, something that happened. How did she get paralyzed? All that stuff. They give us some details, but I didn't know everything. And it was actually one of the reasons I wanted to get the back issues and actually read some of this stuff and find out how she got hurt, see, all this stuff that happened. And again, but I still, from the current story, what I needed, I got plenty of, and I was able to understand who and what's going on here.
The Battle of Boston and things like that have happened. This story, this run, was filled with a lot of epic arcs, and George Perez's run was filled with that. I'm doing this series a massive injustice by not recognizing how many people have touched Wonder Woman from George Perez on. Obviously, you can go to the run before that and do the same thing. But it's one of the great things about Wonder Woman is there's been so many great arcs, and a lot of them are undiscovered by people if they haven't been reading her, because she's a character who a lot of times are under people's radar because of the fact that she was a female character. And even though she's a member of the Trinity in our eyes, she isn't obviously as represented as Batman and Superman have been throughout the years. So I do encourage people listening to this to seek out some of these great runs of Wonder Woman because you're missing some really interesting and unique storytelling. I love the New York City MetaHuman promotions guys. They would jump right on this. New Wonder Woman, there's a chance for us to make some money off of this. Let's get some promotions going. And I love the bit where he's going, hey, babe, all you have to do is worry about being good enough. We don't want to waste our time bailing you out if you can't cut it. Do not worry. I am good enough. There was 2, 4, 5, 6 arrows already in him, and she had another one ready to go.
Yeah, that is funny because seeing them, I was like, oh, we got sleazy guys here, and you could just tell just the way, especially that, hey, babe, I'm like, oh boy, come on, and I chuckled and I laughed, and especially how these guys play out later on, you really do see the sleaze factor. And it's kind of neat because Artemis wouldn't know, don't trust these guys. She's not dealt with this world. She doesn't know, and she's not going to go to Diana, hey, what do you think of these guys? No, this is going to be who she is. She's going to, continue this. And it's funny because even with the sleaze antics that we get, she is still trying to follow the code and follow the mission that she's been given. And I like the fact that she's still going forward with what she thinks Wonder Woman needs to do in the fights she needs to make.
I want to talk about Artemis's speech. Ladies and gentlemen, the new Wonder Woman. How will your reign as Wonder Woman be different from your predecessor? I will succeed. Unfortunately, my sister allowed herself to become enmeshed in personality conflicts and side issues. I will not. That sounds as though you have a problem with Diana. I have no problem. She has been working in a fast food restaurant for several months, while the women of this planet labor under oppression and villainy. I think perhaps she does not understand the seriousness of the situation. From this day forth, I will fight to end the oppression of women, the destruction of children, and since aggression and hatred towards women is great evil, my first priority will be to end the violence that mars the world society. Yeah. And this was at a time where the anti-hero was becoming a lot more popular. So you see that as a rally cry. And here's the great part about that. You flash from that sequence to Micah getting beat up and Diana coming on the scene. And the change to her status quo where she's like, listen, I need a job. I need money. I need those to help others. You've been asking me to work for you, but here's some things we're not going to do. This is not the Wonder Woman agency. We're going to split things in half. We are going to work together, and here's how we're going to maintain the business, and we're also going to hire my friend to be our lawyer. I mean, just such a great way that Diana takes care of others in her plans to move forward herself. Her motivation is totally driven for benevolent reasons. It's not for financial gain, other than the fact that that financial gain will help those closest to her that are in need.
Yeah, and I think that was another cool thing with that is she's like, we're 50-50, but I get 20% of new revenue I generate. Plus, there's going to be 10% going to a separate agency to help women. And my friend gets a job. I liked how she had a solid business plan going into this. This wasn't just let's do this. She laid it out and she really thought about it. Plus, also that barroom fight where she beats up those guys, she really unleashed on them.
Oh, yeah.
And that for me was that's kind of cool. Because even the guy's like, oh, yeah, you're not going to do anything right, sweetheart. Somehow you've gotten the wrong idea about me. I should correct that. And she beats the heck out of that guy. That for me was like, oh yeah. Not only were we getting Artemis, who was a little bit rougher, a little bit tougher version of Wonder Woman, Diana had kind of crossed over, but she didn't completely lose who she was. She didn't kill the guy. It doesn't look like she broke anything. She just hurt him pretty bad. She gave him a beat down. He's not going to forget anytime soon. I thought that for me was kind of a cool, that was kind of a cool moment.
And then they do it you should do in any good run of any book. You say to yourself, look, we need something. We need something to beef it up. We need a guest appearance that is going to make people take notice. We need somebody who's going to make people go, oh, okay, this is a passing of the torch. This is a nod to, a hero who just needs a nod. You send in Hawkman, of course. and in that sequence, you just kind of go, oh, wow, she obviously is a cool character because Hawkman likes her. I actually
now,
really...
a question for you.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming you were reading Hawkman at the time. Did she appear in his book after this? Because she's like, hey, let me get him to the hospital, then I'm all yours.
She did appear with Hawkman? I have to go back and check the issues to see...
Because there's no editor notes or anything like that, and I was wondering...
And honestly, I was thinking the same thing. I would have liked to have seen editor notes for this. I don't have a good answer for you now. I seem to remember the two of them teaming up.
Okay.
Ooh. Was it in this? Was it in a Justice League book? Or what? I mean, in a Hawkman or in a Justice League book? I don't remember. Oof. I'll have to check. For our next... what I'll do? I'll check for the part 2 of this, and I'll reference back to it. Rather so we're not doing this while we're recording.
Right.
But it's a really good question, so I'll try to find that information out for the next recording. I seem to remember that. It's a long time since I've read that run. But, I was reading Hawkman at this time. This was before, Jeff Johns had done kind of the connecting the dots of everything with Hawkman. So this was the 0 Hour Hawkman, where 0 Hour tried to kind of correct some things with Hawkman, but it still wound up being pretty convoluted back at the time. But yet I always loved the character. He's an interesting sort of character. So, I'll have to check. It's a very interesting question that you have there. But it was a great cliffhanger because it ended off that story arc and put both Artemis and Diana in an interesting status quo. And then, which takes us to issue number 94, which is really the first arc with Artemis really being Wonder Woman and with Diana kind of in this new role. We get to start seeing the gang wars going on, and 2 villains are brought into the whole game. Actually, more than 2 villains. I'm oversimplifying.
Right.
But we've got to start off with Cheshire and Poison Ivy. I really liked how that sequence all played out. We get the opening story arc with Ivy. Ivy's living with this guy, and the second he's calling her Ivy, I'm like, uh-oh, this is not going to end well for him. So she gets this offer to be an assassin, and the offer was obviously lucrative enough to make her go, nah, I've been waiting this guy out to have his insurance go. I don't have time for that now, so, for him to put me in his will, so I'm just going to go with the insurance right now. Bye, honey. Still with me, Jeffrey? Guess not.
Yeah. Oh, God, Ed, I tell you, I you see the cover, you saw her on the cover, so I knew as soon as they showed the red hair, the green dress, I'm like, oh, there's Ivy. Then he calls her Ivy. I'm like, oh, okay, bye-bye. Because the moment where she's putting on the lipstick, and it was a cool, usage of her being all green, except you can see her hand. You see he's not green, but her face, the lipstick, all that, you're like, oh, yeah, she's poisoning up. Goodbye. And again, part of me likes Ivy as the Earth Warrior, not a hired killer, but I gotta say I love this sequence. I chuckled, and especially because it goes right from here to Cheshire and her escape.
I think one of the great things about Ivy is she's a malleable character in the sense that I like that she can be an Earth Warrior. I like that she can wear a lot of different roles. And I do think that she's interesting. So that every bit of that worked. I don't think it takes away from what you like about her in the Earth Warrior. I think you get both. And I think that's one interesting thing about the character is she's a flexible character in the way that she can be used. The Cheshire prison break I thought was awesome. What was great about it is you saw that thing tossed in and you're like, oh, here we go. But the note, Cheshire, if the guards at Dundee are as corruptible as advertised, you will have received this package. I have included a mirror, a length of twine, a plastic butter knife, and a check for half your fee should you decide to work for me. If you cannot use the enclosed to escape from Dundee, then you aren't the one for this job. Regards, Sazia. What a great sequence of events. That was one where I would have liked to have seen her escape, but that's only because of the fact that the sequence setup was so great. The pacing, again, of this run, I just thought the stuff they did on camera that made you want to see things off camera that you didn't need to see, I thought was really well done.
Yeah, and I tell you, I'm like you. I would have liked to have seen the escape, but because it left so much to the imagination, you got that look on her face like, oh, yeah. And in the items, a mirror, twine, a plastic butter knife. How did she use that? It gets the mind imagination. And I think that for me was why I'm okay with how they did it, why I enjoyed it, and why I chuckled so much after the end. We saw Ivy drop her husband. We didn't actually see what she did, but it's got to be something cool. So there was kind of a neat just usage of just letting our mind's eye wander and try to figure out exactly how she got away. Yes,
exactly. And that's all you really needed at that point was to let your mind's eye wander. I think I like to see those things only because they're so vivid in my mind. That was not in any way a criticism. It was more what I find interesting. So then we flesh to Sazia and her setting up her whole sequence of events. And she's willing to pretty much so take risks that could cause mass destruction, harm to everybody. Who cares? Her ambition far outweighs her sense of self-preservation and preservation of others. Because she literally, I think, will not only put herself at risk, but anybody else to accomplish her goals. That's how far her ambition has overtaken any sense of ethics.
Yeah.
And that kind of drive is interesting. You don't see that very often. And she's somebody I'd like to see go up against like a Lex Luthor, for example.
Oh, yeah. Nice villain battle.
Mm-hmm.
That would be kind of cool because, she's got that level of, I'm starting to see she's got that level of, qualities that Luthor had. And my money would be on Luthor just because I usually don't bet against Luthor, but she would give him a run for his money, and now the science experiment do we actually see who she pulls through, or was this a setup for a later issue? I mean, a later story arc?
I don't know. I forget on that one. It's a great question.
Because I don't remember any of the future people that she pulls into it that she would have needed that device to actually pull them in. So that's why I was thinking, is this something that laid down for the next story arc?
I don't know. I guess part of me was thinking that's how she got a hold of Cheetah. Because it's a female that was clearly coming through.
Right.
I don't know, though. I guess I was... To give you an honest answer, I was always linking that to Cheetah. But then, now that you're saying that, I don't remember.
Because I didn't think she would need that to pull Cheetah in.
Right.
Yeah, because Cheetah's not any crazy mystic type of thing. She's Cheetah. Should be able to contact her.
Right.
I was assuming that was just another letter, a similar letter that they didn't show because they wanted a nice surprise factor at the end of the issue.
Yeah, I don't know. Now that you're saying that, I guess I always linked it to Cheetah, and maybe I'm mistaken in doing that. We'll have to address that. Is this addressed anywhere else later in the arc? I'm going to kick myself if it is. We may be referring back to this in the second part.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think through now. Yeah, well, let's follow up with this to see if it comes up later. Because here's the thing, if it doesn't happen later in the arc, it's a different writer after this. Oof. I don't remember. We'll have to talk about it. Ken. We have to talk about Ken, right? Because, we got an investigation agency now where Diana's taking on cases. And we've got a girl who's being stalked, right? She's engaged, she's happy, and this guy won't let her go and won't leave her alone. To the point where, there's a point in time where you have trouble letting somebody go, and there's a point in time where you are destructive to that person. I loved this sequence of events. I love the way it played out. I love what she did with Ken. I love that she basically said, listen, not only am I going to... She did the typical, what superheroes that are flyers do. They took him all the way up to the sky, right? And you're like, let's drop him a few times, and let's get him used to this whole idea. Listen, do you understand? Good. Now, there is somewhere you must go. Now, at first I'm thinking to myself, she could have put him in prison or something like that. So she took him to a correctional facility as far as a therapist and all that kind of stuff. But basically said, this is Little Falls, Wyoming. You will live here from now on. Dr. Martin will be your therapist. You will be meeting with her 3 times a week. I hear they need tool and die makers at the factory. If you try to return to Boston or bother Janie or refuse therapy, I will hear about it. And I will be angry. What a cool use of her doing this detective role. If there's one thing I will say with this arc that my only regret with this arc, with the fact that it only went through issue 100, I was very happy to continue on with this.
I know.
I really love this story for how it played out. The Diana stuff as well as the Artemis stuff. I think it was just really just great material. And I think, though, any good story should do that, where you're like, I could have kept living in this world for quite some time. I think what I loved about this storyline was that they didn't. You know what I mean? I think they gave you just enough that you were super excited about everything. They let it last long enough that you remained super excited about it before the story arc came to the eventual conclusion that it did. That's going to be a fun part to talk about in the second and part of this is there anything we would have done differently or anything we wished would have been done differently in this story arc? Because my excitement is I'm looking through some of these issues because we're talking about this issue and the next one, and then we're going to wrap up for this first part of this discussion. And this story arc is the first one that really, these 2 issues is really the first part of the arc where it's kind of normal, them just operating as heroes in their new status quo. You really needed this one before you start kicking into where this story eventually goes. I wanted some establishment of what is Artemis like in Wonder Woman? What is Diana like? In the gradual build to issue 100 with this story arc. Man, this is just a great time to be reading Wonder Woman.
You know the thing I loved about that Ken thing?
What?
One, again, agreeing with you where it was a really cool just, moments and just how taking him up and dropping him, but also in true Diana form, she's trying to rehabilitate this guy.
Yep.
She gets him therapy, gets him a job. These are kind of stuff that would actually help, Ken maybe move on and have a productive life. Granted, she moves him across the country against his will and, threatens him multiple times. But there is still that level of Diana in there where she's helping this guy, and I think that is kind of a neat way to look at it, a neat way to deal with it. But you get it; it's a funny moment. You get to going on, and then it goes right from there into the continuing of the story. This was one of those things where it was a funny moment where it had us laughing. They spent multiple pages on this, but it was entertaining and it was good, and it kind of, it furthered the story on who she is and what she's about. This is a different Diana. She's looking at life differently. So it's not a wasted moment. It's not wasted time. It's a continuation of the adventure, continuation of the story and her growth as a character. And I thought that for me was something I was like, man, that's really neat.
I love that the cases that Diana's getting in, she's like, not this one, not this one, not this one. Man, they're all bad, except for the one where she's like, saving the dog isn't such a bad thing. But then all of a sudden, Paulie Longo comes in, offering some real scratch for some protection money. And you got a situation where Diana's like, why would I want to be involved with helping you or any of that stuff? Well, before that debate can really continue, Cheshire shows up, and the whole fight begins where Diana's people now are in danger just by virtue of being in that location. So it's Diana, Etta, the whole crew. Poison Ivy shows up. Poison is being used on Diana, so you've got two heavy hitters poisoning her. And she's still going. The poison is strong enough that I forget what they referenced. It was some huge thing that the poison would actually take her down. Oh, enough poison her to kill a sequoia.
Yeah,
and she's still going. Diana references how weak her legs are getting and things like that because of the fact that she's got the poison racing through her. I love the sense of determination in her that we normally reserve for Superman in this, but yet her way of handling it, that intestinal fortitude, that just ability to keep pressing on in spite of the battle. I loved the action sequences in this. I think that's been a consistent through Deodato's art. His construction of action sequences, I think, have worked really well in this particular story. And how I loved when she threw Ivy at Cheshire because of the fact that it was the only way to make sure that Paulie Longo didn't die.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And again, it's improvise, adapt, overcome. And that's the kind of cool fight sequences we get with Diana, especially, when you really get some. This story has really laid out some neat combat and some neat visual artworks. But also throughout this, I love the fact that, after all this stuff, Diana's, on wobbly legs because of the poison, everything going on. She sees this this old woman in the alleyway. You have to get away from bad people all around. And yeah, that's Cheetah. And you can kind of, you see the hand, and I was suspecting it would be Cheetah just because she's got a regular runnings with Diana. But that for me was a really cool moment. I was like, yeah.
Another great example of where things happen off camera, because we never saw how Cheetah captured Diana.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that Diana was already complaining about what the poison had done to her, Cheetah goes and captures her and brings her back in. I love how this turned into a swerve, and we'll have to talk about it throughout the issue, but this is the last issue we're going to talk about on part one. We're left with they're having pizza around Diana, who's chained up, and kind of, talking about what are they going to do next and things like that with her. There is the assumption, because Diana's bracelets were welded together by a man, that she's powerless now. And I love how that whole sequence plays out where Diana breaks free and dispels some of the rumors that were out there about how all that works. There's a lot of balance in this issue with the Diana sequence versus the Artemis sequence. It's really a well-done, action-packed issue. And it's a great example in this series about how not everything has to be part of this big overarching, you went from the contest, which is a big story. These are some smaller issues, but the purpose is really an establishment of status quo. Really important to do to get people comfortable with how this world's operating. Artemis's gentle handling of victims may, for some, leave something to be desired.
Yeah. Artemis, she's got to work on her people skills. But it's funny. That is such a kind of it's a tragedy, but it's also very. it's a very accurate and just portrayal of who she is. Especially because as this plays out, he's like, he hit you. Why didn't you strike him back? I couldn't. He'd have killed my babies. My babies would have starved. Good. Better they starve than have a mother who is a parasite and a coward. I was like, dang, that's tough. That's kind of rough on her.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I really found interesting and all that. But yet, in its own way, it was motivating. Because that's the person who later saves Artemis.
Yeah, and it ends up costing her. But it was, it's kind of neat that you look at these different people on the screen. I love the fact that we see the others looking at the TV, seeing this play out. All this got captured on film. So all this played out. Everybody saw that. And I thought that for me was another kind of interesting factor, that how much Artemis is in the limelight. And it was something that I didn't notice really before, that every time Artemis is there, there's the cameras following her. Every time she's there, she's getting a lot of press. And, initially it didn't even dawn on me. And you could actually say, oh, it's the new Wonder Woman, so there's doing. But we later learn that it's not about that. We learn later on what exactly is causing her to have such a really great PR team going on, and why a lot of this is playing out the way it is. I think that for me is a kind of a telling thing into, Artemis, into her sleazy representatives that she has, and even the people behind the company that she has. I think this was a really great multiple layer attack and a really cool layout of the story arc.
Now, one of the great parts about this storyline is we get to see the first appearance of the villain. I mean, who really, people now are it's a household name, the Chauvinist. I love when he comes in and he's doing his little rant and raving. This is my favorite bit. You ever heard of this guy, Dave? Not a whisper to. That was a cool sequence where you have this big brute that comes in and Artemis kind of taking him down, but it's a great blending of humor and with an action sequence with a character that was clearly made for the purpose of kind of, beefing up Artemis. And that was really great.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, it's really cool visual stuff. Just showing her throw down and beat the heck out of this guy. And it was kind of I was like, man, she's really throwing down and she's doing a really good job here.
Wasn't there 2 gauntlets when Hippolyta gave it to her?
Yeah.
Why is she only wearing one? Because she meant in the wrong hand when she punched him. And she didn't have a gauntlet on that hand. So what happened to the other one?
I don't know. I missed that. Holy crud. Because she had 2 gauntlets, so...
I don't remember in later issues if she has 1 or 2, but I guess my question is what happened to the other gauntlet?
Throughout this issue, she only has the 1 gauntlet, which... that doesn't make sense.
I do love that during that whole battle, when the gun was ready to be fired at Artemis, that the girl was sort of inspired, didn't want you to think I was a coward, and actually got shot and killed because of it. So now all of a sudden, Paulie Longo's like going back for the magician, trying to get some help for the battle that he's got going on as a crime lord. There's multiple arcs going on. I mean, multiple stories going on here at once. And I do like that constant shift between what's happening currently, what's happening behind the scenes to drum up the next event that's happening. I like that there's always something pushing forward to look towards the next issue or 2 issues down the line or something like that. These stories are serialized. And one of the things I've always enjoyed about comic books is very rarely are they single-issue isolated experiences. You can have a self-contained single issue with great drama that starts beginning, middle, and ending and be satisfied with that. But there's usually some thread in there that is enough to get you excited for what's coming next. I look back at my first X-Men comics. It was the issue with Belasco. And the cool part about that is that was really a self-contained issue. They went to, his realm and things like that. But so much of that happened, you wanted to know what happened to Illyana. You wanted to know what happened to the X-Men after that. That was my introduction to them as a team. But there was certainly enough in there that had me questioning, where do these characters go from here? This issue does a great job of that, too, in the sense that we've got our villains behind the scenes that are battling each other. Their story's still going forward while we're seeing what's going on with Diana and what's going on with Artemis. And that's really important balance to storytelling. You never can forget anything that's going on in Wonder Woman's world in this arc because of the fact that they're constantly giving you little tidbits, little reminders, little teases to come back in the future.
Oh, yeah. And I liked how when this fight sequence is going on, Diana breaks out, Diana's throwing down, and she starts pulling the divide and conquer. You know, she grabs Cheshire, flies straight up, and she's like, hey, if you're going to kill me, go ahead. But remember, you know, we are flying and you can't fly. And I love the fact that she's like, you know, the ground is 30 seconds away. I think even you would scream when you hit. Mm-hmm. You know, again, showing Diana with a little bit of edge, but also then Diana trying to get everybody on the same page. Diana actually playing out to Cheshire to try to get her in on this, saying, hey, let's try to get this so the whole place doesn't tear each other apart. Let's try to actually work together as a team, which doesn't do so well, but there is still, Diana is still trying, and I like seeing that.
I love the handling of the stone golem.
Yeah.
With, Poison Ivy showing us again, she's very, very formidable in what she does. The battle where Cheetah comes up behind Diana, looks like she's ready to stab her, and then we learn more about what's going on with Cheetah and Diana. There is an honor amongst those two. And, Cheetah references, you saved my life in Moldavia. I figured I should return the favor. I rubbed off some of the poison Ivy gave me. I think you'll find the scratches I gave you are just for show. I did the bandaging myself. So she basically made it look like she did more to Diana than she did in order to allow Diana to escape. So Diana didn't just do it on her own. Cheetah was a sidekick or a helper in that whole sequence. I do like that about Diana, where you never at any point in time believe that the Cheetah wouldn't eventually, for her own gain, eventually turn on Diana and go her own path. But I do believe the honor that's going on there in that moment is genuine. And I love when that exploration happens in comics. I just think it's a really great idea.
Well, and again, it makes sense between these two characters to do that. And I think that's something that you got to look at sometimes. Like sometimes when, it's the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And Lex and Superman have had moments where they've got to team up together. Or, there's an invasion happening on Earth and they got to work together. They've got to do something and they got to put aside things. You see that type of team, that teamwork. Bruce has had that with a couple of his rogues where he's actually had to work with them because of something else. And it's the really, the solid good heroes that have that presence to them, they can pull that kind of stuff off. And I like that. I like seeing that with the villain. That, at any point in time later on, the partnership is over. She doesn't have to say, next time we meet, you won't be so lucky. No, the next time they meet, it's a different circumstance. Something else could happen.
I like the question, where's Ivy? And we see Ivy running to escape. And she's smart. She's like, hey, listen, I haven't survived this long by being dumb. I'm getting out of here. She gets there and Paulie Longo's guys are waiting. So, who are you, lady? I'm your worst nightmare. She's kissing him. I want some of that. Me too. I'm next. And we all know they're done.
Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na.
Paulie Longo, though, has got another play in hand. You got a guy who's like, okay, she's bringing in metahumans, and we need to step up my game. Who am I going to bring in? The Joker. What a great cliffhanger to the issue. Which our next episode, we'll kind of talk about the whole Joker thing and where that story goes, because that takes place in issue number 96. I do like that this story didn't hesitate to bring in characters from around the DC Universe, villains. When these guys are reaching out for mercenaries, they're reaching out for hired guns. The more aggressive the game gets, the more creative you're going to get in your choices on who you reach out to. And I really loved that organically made sense in the story, that we started seeing some of these characters make an appearance.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, and I tell you, it was funny. I can only imagine on a monthly basis, reading this, if that had been the final scene of the issue, like, no, I want more. Because when I was reading this now, I had issue 96 ready to go, and I remember finished reading this issue the first time I was reading it. It was like 11 o'clock or something like that at night. I was like, it's late. I shouldn't. And I'm finding myself clicking on 96 just because it was the Joker, just because. So this was a great way to end this issue, a great cliffhanger. This series had some amazing cliffhangers, amazing final pages of issues that really had you chomping at the bit for the next issue.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is really important with this one, is those final cliffhangers made you excited and made you go, I want to read more. I read this monthly, so I hit that cliffhanger and I was like, oh, you got to be kidding. And I thought the art team did a great job with the lighting and the mood of capturing the sinister nature of the Joker. Look at the eyes and the whole wicked build of him. It was really an exciting surprise to see him there. Because remember, this is during an era where, sure, there were previews, and that was out there, but I honestly didn't read a whole lot of the previews magazine because I was going to my local comic shop. I was grabbing things as they came out. So this just get me excited for when the next issue would come about. I was going to Comic Shop weekly on Wednesdays, kind of picking up my new books, seeing what was on the shelf. These cliffhangers were pretty critical because when you had a tight budget and you had to make a decision over what books you were going to read next, the story arc building to something was a lot of times a deciding factor on whether you stayed with the book or you moved to something else. This one clearly, and the cover of the next issue clearly, is what drew you into reading the book. So I can't wait to continue talking about this. Our next part of this, we're actually going to do a part 2. We're going to talk about issues 96 to 100, which is really the ending of this particular thread of story arc with it. And I hope you enjoyed the first part of this. This was an interesting story. So, Jim, kind of like where we're at right now, it's kind of like do a capstone. Worth reading this story?
Oh God, yeah, big time. And it's, as I said, I wanted to get more issues. I wanted to get more stuff from this, from this era of Wonder Woman. This really held up.
Yeah, the writer had a huge run on Wonder Woman, and honestly, I recommend every single issue building up to this because this tone and this presentation of balance and storytelling was prevalent throughout the entire series. It was really a great series, and I believe, and I might be wrong on this one, so I'm throwing this out there. I thought the Brian Bolland covers were consistent all the way through. This issue 90 was the first one with Mike Deodato art. The Brian Bolland covers were throughout, and the art team was different beforehand, but the art was still very nice before this, so it's not a knock. I don't mean that as a knock on the art. This just this is where Mike Deodato started to get his notice for his DC work, and became an interesting name because of his whole Wonder Woman work. So it's interesting. It'll be fun to talk about this in the next episode.
Nothing like the handy-dandy electro-claw for carving through metal doors.
I would like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We're actually have some voicemails on our next episode, so we'd love to have you part of our show. I want to remind everyone about our show website, RagingBullets.com. That's where you're going to find news on episode releases. It links into our Twitter account. We have a Facebook fan page. We also have a Facebook group community. I encourage you to join that community and hang out with some of the really cool people that are not only listeners to our show, but are just fans of comics and pop culture in general. It's a wonderful community run by wonderful people. So, definitely encourage you to check that out. We have Facebook, our own personal Facebook pages. We have Google Plus pages. I'm on the PlayStation Network. Lots of different ways to hang out with us. So certainly consider joining up and connecting with us in any of the ways that make sense for you. Sponsoring this episode is once again DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what's going on at DCBService.com?
Hey. Come on, bundles. We got a great Rebirth bundle, 60% off, $22.61 of all the Rebirth issues as well as the number ones. A really cool variant cover bundle, 45% off, $31.16, and a continued support of Vertigo, 50% off, all 10 issues, only $19.90.
I'm a big fan of those bundles. You mentioned the Vertigo one in particular, but the Rebirth bundles. The great part about those things, if you want to try out, the new issues that are coming out, to be able to get those at those discounts helps you, because they usually do those for a few months, and knowing the fact that people are pre-ordering these, right? People need a few months usually to kind of get the books initially. but then also be able to decide, which books am I going to keep? And being able to do that in a bundle at a discount is really just a great opportunity. I remember years ago when they first started the bundles, they went for like a month or two, and it was never really long enough to match up with the releases. So then they finally started doing this, and they've been very consistent with saying, hey, look, you commit to these bundles to try some books out. We're going to give them to you for a few months at that discount, just to make sure that you have an opportunity to really try out these books and decide what's right for you. I really appreciate them for doing that, because I think it's just a cool way to go about it, especially when they're doing it for things like Vertigo as well and continuing to support the line. So it's good stuff. Over at InStockTrades.com, they have some great deals right now. The Wonder Woman Earth 1 hardcover, Volume 1, $12.64, talking about Wonder Woman. Grant Morrison writing, beautiful artwork. If you have not picked this one up, you need to do yourself a favor. They also have the Invasion storyline. I remember, did you ever read this one, Jim?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, so this is a trade paperback. It's a new edition of it. It's 45% off, only $10.99. When it came out, I remember going to the comic shop, and as a teaser for it, they had an issue of the Daily Planet. Like a full-sized issue of the Daily Planet that you could pick up and read that talked about the Invasion storyline.
Cool.
It's cool to see this one collected, because I actually want to pick this up and reread it, because it's been years since I've read the storyline. I just remember it was neat from a swag standpoint to go to a comic shop and get an issue of the Daily Planet, then go to read this interesting arc that involved this, literally an invasion. You recognize some of the aliens from books that we've read in outer space in this show, but the Dominators are actually a part of this one.
Oh, nice.
So, the Superman, the Men of Tomorrow trade paperback, 45% off, only $9.34. So I want to thank InStockTrades.com and DCVService.com for continuing to support our show. I actually would be remiss if I didn't shout out, too, that they are a digital partner. So whether you're using Comixology or My Digital Comics, be sure to link your accounts and get 5% of those purchases towards your DCB service order. That's actually how I bought my issues for this particular recording, because I wanted them digitally like you did for the purpose of this recording. So I just want to shout that out. Speaking of our next episode, we are going to continue talking Wonder Woman and wrap up this particular arc. We're going to be talking about issues 96 through 100, the end of the Fall of an Amazon story arc. So we will see you next week.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.